Hello, and welcome to Book Reviews Kill, a podcast about fantasy, sci-fi, and horror novels. I'm Evan.
And I'm Chad.
And today you are joining us for our recap and discussion of The Dark Tower, Book 7, The Dark Tower. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is going to be...
Evan.
This is... oh my God. Oh, God say thank you. We finished
God say
it.
thank you.
We're there. We're just going to go straight into the recap, everybody. Let's just... You know what we're doing. If you've made it to Book 7... Episode 7 with us. We don't need to do the intro. Let's just do the recap. We have a lot to talk about. Let's go.
Let's go. The book begins with the quartet, separated in both time and space. Susanna Dean is with Mia in Feddick, delivering Mordred Deshane, while Jake Chambers and Donald Callahan are in New York City in 1999, intent on rescuing her. Roland, Deshane, and Eddie Dean are in Maine after convincing Calvin Tower to sell the vacant lot. Callahan and Jake enter the Dixie Pig to find it filled with vampires and servants of the Crimson King. Jake makes his way safely across the room with the help of the Scrimshaw Turtle. But Callahan is not so lucky and kills himself rather than endure the vampire attack. Because of Callahan's sacrifice, Jake, with Oi's help, crosses through the door in the kitchen of the Dixie Pig, successfully navigates the mine trap, and enters Feddick. In Feddick, Mia, her body now physically separated from Susanna Dean, gives birth to Mordred Deshane, the biological son of Roland Deshane and Susanna. The Crimson King is also a co-father of this prophetic child. So it is not surprising when baby Mordred's first act is to shapeshift into a spider and feast on his birth mother, turning her into a lifeless husk. Susanna shoots, but fails to kill Mordred. She manages to eliminate the other agents of the Crimson King and escapes to meet up with Jake at the cross-dimensional door beneath the Dixie Pig, which connects to Feddick. Back in Maine, Eddie and Roland call John Cullum and convince him to head to New York City to find Moses Carver so they can found the Tet Corporation together. They then travel back to Midworld through the door behind the 19th house on Turtleback Lane. Kara laughs. The Tet is reunited in Feddick. They find their way to a door that will take them to Al Ghul Siento with the help of the robot Nigel, who has also been helping Mordred find food. Walter, the man in black, approaches Mordred, hoping to use the sigil on Mordred's heel to enter the Dark Tower. Instead, Mordred is able to enter Walter's mind, which allows him to paralyze and consume the man. The Gunslinger's Quartet comes to Al Ghul Siento in order to set the breakers free and protect the beams. They are met by a group of breakers, friendly to their cause, including Shimi, Roland's old friend and Magus. Roland quickly establishes a plan. On the day of the attack, they light several of the buildings on fire and approach the town from different directions in order to create the illusion of many people attacking at once. The battle goes in favor of the Tet until the very end, when Pimley Prentice is able to mortally wound Eddie. Eddie's last words are a warning about a being named Dandello. While Susanna stays behind to bury Eddie, Roland and Jake Chambers return to the Keystone World to save Stephen King's life. The pair recruit Irene Tassenbaum to drive them to the scene of the foreseen accident. Jake jumps in front of the speeding van and gives up his life to save King's. Roland buries him along the side of the road, and Tassenbaum says she will return and plant a rose on his grave. Tassenbaum and Roland drive to New York City to see what became of the Tet Corporation. In their absence, the company has flourished. Moses Carver tells his story and returns Aunt Talitha's cross to Roland. Roland and Oi return to Midworld through the door in the Dixie Pig. Roland comes back to Feddick, and he, Oi, and Susanna take a passage under the castle in the mountains, but they are pursued by a Todash monster. They manage to fend it off by lighting bones using the sterno that Susanna had previously found. When they come out of the tunnel, they find themselves in the Badlands, where they endure intense cold wearing clothes ill-suited to the cold weather. They come upon Le Casa Roy-Roos, where they encounter Rando Thoughtful, the Crimson King's Minister of State. Thoughtful is initially disguised as 3 separate variations of Stephen King, but tells of the Crimson King's last days in his castle after his glamour is revealed. After ordering his servant to commit suicide in front of him and smashing the wizard's rainbow, he commits a violent suicide using a spoon and continues toward the tower as an undead creature. After leaving the castle, Roland and Susanna hear a scream in the distance. It was the sound of Mordred Deshane eating Thoughtful. What's left of the Tet comes to the white land of Empathica. There, they meet an older man in a pleasant dwelling who calls himself Joe Collins. He nearly kills Roland Deshane, Susanna Dean, and Oy while feeding on their laughing response to his comedic stylings. They are saved when Susanna accidentally swats the sore on her mouth and has to go to the bathroom to stop the bleeding. In Collins' medicine cabinet, she finds a note from Stephen King that reveals Collins' true identity, Dandello, the person Eddie had warned of. When Susanna comes out of the bathroom, she shoots Dandello and discovers a secret room where Dandello had held a man named Patrick Danville captive for many years. Despite the offer from Stuttering Bill, Collins and Danville's robot caretaker to take them to the Dark Tower on a powered sled, Roland decides to continue on foot. Susanna, who has been haunted by dreams of Eddie and Jake, decides to try and leave Midworld and find them. She recruits Danville to draw her a door to leave. She shares a tear-soaked goodbye with Roland before going through the door. Mordred Deshane attacks Roland's camp the last night before Roland would reach the tower. Hearing Oy's barks, Roland wakes up in time to save himself and kill Mordred. Unfortunately, he was not in time to save Oy's life. Oy's haunting last word is Olin. Finally, Roland reaches the field of Can-Ka no Rey. What follows is the final battle between Roland Deshane and the Crimson King. The king is locked outside the tower on a balcony and can only throw sneeches at Roland while waiting for him to be drawn to the tower. Roland's secret weapon is Patrick Danville, who draws a picture of the king and uses a combination of dye from rose petals and Roland's blood to color the king's eyes. After the picture is complete, Danville erases everything except the eyes, and Roland is able to approach the tower safely after bidding Danville to head away from the tower. Roland shouts the names of the fallen comrades and loved ones he has met along his journey and enters the tower. In the epilogue, we see Susanna step through the artist's door and into New York City. One of Roland's sandalwood guns has rusted through, and Susanna tosses the gun into a dumpster. She meets Eddie and Jake, who are now brothers with the last name of Torin. Neither one remembers their adventures with Susanna, but Eddie is already in love with her. Stephen King assures us that a dog named Oy will later arrive in New York to join them. In the coda, we observe Roland climbing the tower at long last. The rooms in the tower all depict scenes from Roland's life, and each has a distinctive smell. When Roland reaches the top, he sees the Mohane Desert. He is sucked through, his memories fade, and his quest begins anew. This time, however, Roland finds himself equipped with the Horn of Eld, the one he had lost before. This appears to be a hint that things may yet change and that Roland may eventually find redemption. The book ends the way the gunslinger began, with the line, "The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed." I don't even know where to start, man.
Yep, I don't. Well, I know where to start. We're gonna start at the end. We're gonna start at the end because that's what I want to know about. This is your first time getting to the end of this series. It's what anybody else reading this who's read it for the first, second, third, whatever time, they all want to know. Chad, what did you think of the ending of this series?
I went through shockwaves where every ripple that went through me, and every time I thought about it again, my opinion changed. I started not liking it. And now that I'm 40 shockwaves deep, I love it.
Okay,
and cool. I think it's one of the most clever and unique ending to any story that has ever been written and I've ever read. Like, this story is amazing. It's way more than I thought it was. And if there's anything, I can get more into this later, but if there's anything, any story that is actually original, this is it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Every aspect of it. There's nothing like The Dark Tower at all. Like,
no,
I couldn't make a recommendation video of books that you should read when you're done with The Dark Tower. It's just, it's done, and now you're going to go read other stuff, and you will never read anything else like it ever again.
Nope.
Do you have any questions about like what anything means, or do you have any ideas about like what's your thought process?
I got a whole theory. Okay, so
let's hear it.
On this being like I never really just like finish this thought. I never really say like, oh, you need to read this or else your understanding of a genre is incomplete. Like, I'm not you need to read the classics. You're missing something. This is this series is the closest I've ever come to being like, you need to read this or else you're missing a piece of the fantasy like genre.
Yeah.
And absolutely. All written works.
It's important. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, let's go back to the question I asked for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. To the ending, ending here. Okay. I think this is the second to last trip. I don't think this next trip through will be the last one. I think it's the second to last. Oh,
interesting. Okay. Yeah. Go expound on that, please. Elaborate on that, please.
Okay. So this one, I think that we just read about was like the most important one or the most, fun to listen to and read. But there's one mistake that happened, and I think that's Susanna and Roland parting ways at the end.
Interesting. I've never heard that theory before.
I think the final time that he goes through the tower, that he goes to the tower, will be with Susanna by his side the entire way.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think because I think the final lesson that he needs to learn is that he doesn't have to be everything for everyone. He doesn't have to be alone at the end. He needs to accept the help of another and proceed. So it's like
never heard that theory before. That's so interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
oh, nice.
I've heard a ton of them, but yeah, not that one.
Yeah, because I was very, very disappointed with Susanna leaving him right at the end. I just thought it was weak and
it did feel kind of like she was
for her.
It's not quite out of. I mean, she wants to go. She wants to get out of there, and if there's a chance that she can see Eddie again, then she's going to take it. That's at least how I looked at it. But it did seem kind of like odd, like especially on a first read through. But at the same time, like Susanna, I feel like knows that Roland has to go, and this kind of feeds into your theory as well. But like I think in this, at least in this turning of the Wheel of Ka, in this journey that Roland is taking, I think that Susanna knows that he needs to do this one alone. Like some part of her just knows that she's done. You know what I mean? And like Roland doesn't want her to, which I think also feeds into your theory, right? Because like something's telling Roland maybe that she needs to be with him too. That's really interesting because he begs her. Yeah, he begs her to stay.
He's down on his knees.
Yeah,
and breaks
she's
her
like,
heart.
I don't want to remember you like this.
Yeah, and so he needs to learn that he doesn't need to do it. But you're right, he does need to go through it one more time alone, in order to learn that lesson. He needs to. Yeah, he needs to repeat this. Oh, and I think the thing that he's going to correct on this next time through is sacrificing Jake
in the beginning
and Susanna,
the gunslinger.
Yeah, at the beginning of Gunslinger. I think he won't do that maybe this next time, and then he won't separate with Susanna. Or maybe I'm wrong, actually. He won't, with Susanna there on the final time through, they won't encounter that. She will be there to protect Jake or something. That won't happen,
Okay, so that's a good theory. Do you want to hear mine?
Thank you. Yes. Oh, I definitely want to hear yours.
Okay, cool. So, so the way that I'm looking at it is, it's kind of in line with what you're saying. Like this is a redemption story. This is Roland's curse, right? Like Roland made some really terrible decisions, and then he went on to go find the tower. He killed his mom. Susan Delgado died. partly because of him, but not really because of him. But, Elaine and Cuthbert and Jamie DeCurry or whatever his name is died.
Death follows him.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it was not necessarily his fault, but wouldn't have happened without him in a way. So there's a couple things here. So did you notice that he had this horn with him this time?
Yeah.
So that is kind of like, in my opinion, Stephen King's way of saying this time it's going to be a little bit different. This is going to be maybe the one where he actually breaks this cycle. Now, see, my theory here is that Roland was never actually supposed to go to the tower at all. Roland is supposed to save the tower by freeing the breakers. And if you'll notice, nobody in that quartet dies until right when the breakers are freed, like right when they disrupt that whole process at Algo Ciento, right? As soon as they do that, Eddie gets shot in the face. And they can all kind of feel it too, right?
Right.
Ka-mai or Ka-mei or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Kashum, thank you. So they can feel Kashum. They can feel it kind of happening. Mm-hmm. And then Eddie dies, and then Jake dies, and then Susanna leaves, and then Oi dies. Like, all within not very much time at all, right?
Dominoes.
Like, Roland, in his obsession with the tower, is going to continue killing the people that he loves until he can get over this obsession, right? And that's his curse. That's his burden to bear, is that he cannot possibly, until after a bunch of different turnings of this wheel, finally figure out that he is not supposed to be sacrificing things for this ending. And this is really key here for you, Chad, and for everybody else listening. I think that this is a message from Stephen King. This is why he wrote the ending the way that he did. It's because, much like with how Sanderson put it in Stormlight Archive, journey before destination. It's about the journey. You can't focus on this endpoint all the time. It can't be your only reason for doing things. And it is on this journey, on this turning. Roland repeatedly lets things fall, literally, and he has a love for these people, but it's not enough. There's still a disregard for that love in his search for this tower that he doesn't even know anything about it. He doesn't even know what it is. He just knows that he wants it. He wants to get there. He wants to get to that ending. Much like the reader. The reader wants to get to that ending, right? And it might not be the ending that we want, which is why I think I agree with you. It's such a brilliant ending because so many people were pissed off about this ending. And I'm not saying that your feelings of being upset about the ending are invalid, because it makes a lot of sense, because it feels kind of like it was all a dream. I think this didn't mean anything, but I think that there's more to it than that. And it's that we as readers and we as consumers of media are obsessed with resolution. We're obsessed with endings. We cannot enjoy a story unless the ending is as perfect as it can possibly be. And it's ironic because this is by not being perfect, right?
Yes.
And it's so fucking brilliant, man. It's so good. And not to mention, every time you reread this story, that's the point of the story, right? Like you're supposed to reread it. You're supposed to go on this journey just like Roland does, like over and over again. So that's one of the reasons I was so excited to reread this story, was because I was doing what the ending wanted me to do. I was doing what the story wanted me to do. That's why it really is, in my opinion, like one of the best endings to any fantasy series ever, while still staying infuriating. Like even the first time I'd read through it, I felt a lot like you did, because I remember you texted me and you were just like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, I was like, okay.
Yeah, and it does take, a little bit. You have to kind of digest it for a little bit. And I hope it doesn't sound patronizing when I'm like, if you really think about it. That's not like what I'm trying to say. It's just, at first, yes, it's very frustrating, but then it really starts to kind of click into place. And to be fair,
it's a show, not tell, of the whole point.
Right. And Stephen King in the coda, in the beginning of the coda, he says, "Yet some of you who have provided the ears without which no tale can survive a single day are likely not so willing. You are the grim, goal-oriented ones who will not believe that the joy is in the journey rather than the destination, no matter how many times it has been proven to you. You are the unfortunate ones who will still get the lovemaking all confused with the paltry squirt that comes to the end of lovemaking. You are the cruel ones who deny the Grey Havens. A Lord of the Rings reference. Are you kidding me? Where tired characters go to rest. You say you want to know how it all comes out. You say you want to follow Roland into the tower. You say that is what you paid your money for, the show you came to see. I hope most of you know better, want better. I hope you came to hear the tale and not just munch your way through the pages to the ending. For an ending, you only have to turn to the last page and see what there is writ upon. But endings are heartless. An ending is a closed door no man or many can open. Dude, he told you. He told you before he told you. It's a warning. Like it's like
beautiful.
It's like a really tongue-in-cheek warning because he knows. Like obviously, he knows people are not gonna not read the last. I bet nobody who's read this series has stopped where he suggested that you stop. And it's so funny because he knows writing it that you're gonna keep going. But it's very like this could be the end. Like Susanna and Oy and Jake meeting in New York, drinking hot chocolate, and living a life together. Could have been the ending of this, and Roland just going into the tower, because that's Roland just going into the tower is the ending that Roland wanted, right?
Right.
It's not the ending that it was supposed to be. It just keeps wrapping in on itself, man.
Right, like and life is never what you want it to be. You know, like you said, it keeps wrapping in on itself. I loved that you read that part right there. I literally also have that paragraph in my notes. It's so wonderful, and I love how he relates to the lovemaking. It's like it's kind of gross, like with anything Stephen King does with the
gotta
sexual.
Make it a little bit gross.
You know, with like the squirt at the end, but it's also like
paltry
very
squirt.
Yeah, it's like
yeah, it's kind of like Alan Watts said. You know, like the point of going to see a symphony is not to hear the end of the symphony. It's to hear the whole thing. Like if you wanted to go see the end, you just go and there'd just be a cymbal player and he'd just bang his cymbals together at the end, and then that would be the end, and then you went and saw it. You know, that's not what it's about. It's a dance. It's the whole thing. It's like when you're dancing, you're not trying to end up somewhere. You're just dancing. You know, you're moving around in circles, a square or whatever. Yeah. And I mean, I wonder sometimes about like have you seen Twin Peaks? Have you ever watched that show?
No, I never have.
You should watch Twin Peaks.
I've been told that before.
There's a theory with Twin Peaks that, and if you're listening right now, you don't have to have watched Twin Peaks to understand what I'm talking about, but David Lynch did a really cool thing, in my opinion, and this is the theory that a lot of people have with it, is that he made an incredible first season of television. It's awesome. The first season of Twin Peaks is excellent. Then it goes into the second season, and the second season is really good too. And then it's bad. It's like it's shitty. It's not a good show towards the end of the second season. And I've heard this theory that, and if you're listening right now and you want to expand on this in an email or something, I'm totally into it because I love Twin Peaks. But David Lynch also had a problem with audiences demanding to know who killed Laura Palmer. They had to know, you know, and he was just trying to make a good TV show. He was trying to make something that was different and had a different vibe to it. It was telling a story about this town, you know, and these people in this town that are affected by this event. It doesn't really matter who killed Laura Palmer. Like what matters is how it affected everybody, right? But everybody was so damn like persistent about finding out who killed Laura Palmer. And then he left the show and the show got really bad. You know, and then there's like Fire Walk with Me, and then the third season and stuff, and he comes back, but it's just, you know, that's another good example of that too, where like I imagine Stephen King maybe felt a little bit like I imagine David Lynch felt, of just like he's been writing. Stephen King had been writing this series for so long, and so many people had probably emailed him or sent him letters saying, I need to know, like, you're taking too long to write these books. I need to know what's in that tower.
Right.
It was just like Roland. And he was like, I'm so sick of this. Like it's about the whole journey. It's about the characters. It's about the interactions that they're having together. The ending is important for sure, but it's not everything. It's definitely not everything. And it's not worth getting upset about usually either. That's why whenever I read books and review books and stuff, I try to not really like hang too much on like how everything shook down, because a really good example, and this is not spoiling anything, but the end of the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang, I am not a fan of that ending at all, but I do think it works. I think it's a very it's an appropriate ending, you know? And an ending doesn't have to always be satisfying. It doesn't always have to be this thing that like ties everything up and snips all the loose ends off, and it's just like this perfect, it's like this perfect package for you, because endings aren't really ever like that. Most endings aren't like that. I mean,
they're messy.
Like they're messy, definitely. And it just so happens that in this, his calling out of how messy endings are is a pretty goddamn good ending.
Yeah. And like, I mean, it's like it just gets so much deeper the more I think about it. Like the tower itself, the name of his series is so clever because it's about the Dark Tower. No, it's not. It's about everything besides the tower. And what is the tower really? Like the faces of all the people are like built into the stones of it. It's like the tower itself is constructed of everything else. Throughout the whole course of the story, it's like this level is this universe, this level. Like the tower isn't the tower, it's everything else. It's like in its own building blocks scream, I am not the point. The end is not the point. The journey is the value, where the value is. I really liked what you said about Roland suffering for the death and making up for the death of that he brought about, right? So like, yes, the ending was horrific, but it's like wonderful because a lot of the people and things that Roland killed deserved it. But death, like even for the greater good, is still an evil that must be balanced as the world seeks equilibrium. Roland, he's only suffering for as much suffering as he kind of deserves. And like none of us in the end can escape the balancing of the scales that will be had. Like Ka, the universe, life, fate, God, essence, whatever you want to call it, like will get theirs. It will settle every score, you know? And so the ending is so appropriate, and that like it sets him on another loop, but it's not an infinite loop.
No, it's just not. It's really important that it's not.
Yeah. And this time he had earned the horn, his sigil. So if he plays his cards right, this next time might be the end. I don't think that it will be, but he's very close, you know? And finally, he will achieve peace. He will arrive at the meadow in the end of the trail. And I don't think Roland is alive,
at the end of the path.
Thank you. Yeah.
The I think meadow at the end of the trail.
Whatever.
You know, same thing. Yeah.
I think Roland's first loop started when he died.
When he died?
Yeah.
When did Roland die?
We don't know. But I mean, when did he...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think he's living at all. I think he's kind of jaked.
Interesting. I never really thought about that either.
Because like, how does he get to the beginning? We never learn.
Get to the Mohaine Desert?
Exactly. He just like always starts there.
I'm not sure. I'm wondering if it's covered in Went Through the Keyhole, but I don't think it is. But I've been reading Went Through the Keyhole, and I'm like I'm almost halfway through it, and it doesn't seem like this, but it does take place after, like the story that Roland's telling in Went Through the Keyhole it takes place after he kills his mom. But it doesn't look like it's gonna quite line up. So yeah, I'm not really sure. But everything you just said, I mean, like in regards to his redemption arc, so to speak, I mean, it's written here in the very first page before the first page, you know. Each book in this series has its own like letter R, like word, and this one has 4, and it's reproduction, revelation, redemption, and resumption.
This universe is an infinite one, but it's also a linear one. It's like the ultimate treatise. I don't know how you say that, on world building, right? Because like at the basis of every world that any creator, author, whatever has built, you kind of have to decide, is your universe an infinite one, or is it a linear one which has a beginning and an end? And Stephen King said, no, I shall not take either of those paths. I shall clear what's between them and make one big path. Like he just he made his own thing. Like it's so fresh. It's so original.
I had another theory about Roland the first time that I finished this, and I don't think that this is true, but I thought it was interesting at least. But the horn kind of like negates this theory that I had, which is funny because I was kind of operating on this theory for a while, and I just like forgot about the horn, I guess. But my initial theory after finishing this book for the first time was that Roland, as the last gunslinger, has been kind of assigned to continually keep up the tower's beams. You know what I mean? So that the tower would like kind of stay intact ad infinitum. You know what I mean? Like just forever.
Sure.
Roland is just assigned as like this guardian of the tower that's always going to trek through and save the beams and save the tower and everything. But that doesn't really work. You know, it's just not as nice of an ending. And it's cool because I kind of thought that up until I started this again. And then I didn't, and kudos to you because you have a much more thorough understanding of this ending than I did when I read this years back. And now I came to the ending and it's so much more now. Like it's so the reread was so cool. It was amazing.
I
knew
really
the entire time what was gonna happen. And so I was looking out for stuff too, right? Like I was looking out. There's a part in Wolves of the Kala where Eddie gets on a horse and he like immediately knows how to ride a horse. You know, he's like, it's this horse, right? And there's just these little the conversation that Roland and the Man in Black have in the end of the first book, like that is a huge hint to what's going on. I mean, the Man in Black is like, that's why in the first episode I was like, what do you think about the Man in Black? Do you think he's like trying to help Roland here? Because in a weird roundabout way, you could almost make the argument that the Man in Black is almost like this agent of chaos that's like trying to get Roland off of this path and just end his suffering for him because he's aware of what's going on with Roland. So he's just like,
you think he knows like, it's his multiple times through?
I think Walter understands it. I think he knows what's going on with Roland. And it begs the question, is this also happening with Walter? Is this happening with like a lot of different versions of Walter? Is Walter trying to break this because he doesn't want to be involved in it anymore? You know, but I think that he had knowledge that this is what the situation was. Even if you go back and read the first that conversation in the first book at the end when they're in the Golgotha with all the bones and they have their palaver, he's basically just like, man, you don't even know what this is. This is just you silly man. Like you're just going for it, aren't you? Like you really want that tower? Fine, go do it. Like let's just do this again, man. Like here we go, round and round we go, Jack. And that's why like reading this again and looking out for these little hints, right? There's so many of these little nuggets where it's like, oh, it's gonna do it again. We're doing it again. So good.
Man, I like that a lot. I think that Roland, because Roland, yes, he brings about a lot of death, but at the same time, he does save the tower. And I think the tower, we might think that the erasing of Roland's mind and memory is a cruel thing. I don't think so. I think it's the tower's mercy because he's saying, you saved me. You do need to right your wrongs and you need to make up for the massive amounts of death that have followed you your whole life. But if you had to do that 1,000 times, you'd go insane.
Well, would you though? I mean, like he doesn't know.
Oh, like only because his memory is erased.
That part at the very, this isn't super connected to what you're saying, but like remember at the very end of this book when he sees the Mohaine Desert and he has like this tiny moment of realization. Yeah, and he's just like, no, not again. Or what does it say exactly? I'm gonna look it up real quick.
It says something like that. It's like, no, not again.
He says, oh no, please not again. Have pity, have mercy. So there's this little, and that's horrific too, by the way. Like Stephen King can't get away from the horror too, because there's that little tiny moment where Roland realizes, oh my God, this happened last time. It happened so many times before it. I'm doing it again. And then all of a sudden he's in the Mohaine Desert again.
But the tower does have mercy. It erases his memory. So he doesn't have to live with the hell of knowing this is his how many times through?
Well, and it's interesting because the door that Roland opens says Roland on it. It doesn't say the gunslinger. It doesn't say it says Roland. And I also had a little bit of a working theory that like Roland is walking into another Roland's mind.
Whoa.
Like I haven't really
like Essence de Roland.
And he's like the observer watching the observer watching what's going on almost. Right. So it's like maybe he's in some kind of, maybe big Roland has a little Roland imprisoned inside of a smaller Roland or so. Like I don't know. That's kind of that's a pretty spacey theory.
Matrixy.
So we've covered quite a bit of the end, and I feel like you and I could just really keep delving into this for a long time. But I want to go over some
about the end
go for it.
From it.
So yeah.
Okay, I think the Crimson King. Unless there's something that I just missed about this because there's a lot going on here, but I think the Crimson King perhaps is a divergence is Roland. at one point, and that's why he goes insane, because he didn't carry on the quest. He knew
he's also trying to break everything down. Interesting.
Yeah,
but why would both of them exist in that space though?
There's like two Eddies. Like, who knows? He just opened a portal. He came through a door one time, and the tower was like, I don't know, bring in another one. Because I think he did it so many times, and the tower wasn't erasing his mind. Finally, he was like, this is worthless, and then like went insane, and then was like, I'm going to, because he tries to accomplish the same thing, kind of. He's like at the tower, and he's like, okay, if I can't fix it, I'll break it.
I'm going to pile onto this theory real quick and just kind of don't think of it as me dismantling it. Think of it as me adding to it.
Please do, if you can. I don't know.
So the way that I kind of like look at a lot of this is that the tower, or Gan, or the Prim, or whatever you want to call it, Ka, is in charge here. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like Walter and the Crimson King's plans to try to undo all of this on an astral, like interdimensional level has been futile this entire time. They don't know it. Like it's just players against Roland going. It's Roland. They're part of Roland's test, but they will never best Roland, in my opinion.
Right.
Like the tower won't, or the Ka, or whatever, like won't let that happen. At least that's how I'm looking at it. I don't think that that might have added to the Crimson King's like insanity, maybe, or you know what I mean? Like how just totally useless it would be to try to do that. And like he's working against powers he has no understanding of, like this is the universe. Like this is the turning, the motion of the universe. Like you're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. You can't dismantle that. Like at least some dude can't, you know what I mean? Like the Crimson King, and he's like totally out of his mind. I really want to move on to some other points.
Like the tower is his father. He has forgotten the face of his father. Sorry.
I want to get to some more specifics, because I feel like the longer we talk about the ending, the spacier this is going to get. And that's cool. That's totally fine. But let's keep making an episode of something. Okay, so I have some questions for you. Okay, so we're kind of working our way back from the ending towards the beginning, so that's fine, right?
Totally fine. My mind is still like all wrapped up. I'm like,
and we're gonna move all around, but I'm just kind of hitting as many high points as I can here, and this is definitely a high point or a really low point, depending on how you look at it. What did you think about Eddie's death? Like, how did that make you feel? He was the first of the quartet to go. Did it seem abrupt? Did it seem dumb? Like, what's going on in your head about that?
Okay, I mean, and it was the first point that I cried in this book, which, man, I was a weepy fool throughout the course of this. It's pretty rare that a book actually brings tears to my eyes. This one did it multiple times, from Eddie dying and on, and just like I didn't even know how important the story was to me or how invested I was until Eddie died, because I thought it would be I knew someone was going to die, and I was preparing myself for everyone but him to die.
Really?
Yeah, like somehow I was just like totally bamboozled.
Yeah, he's like the first. He's Roland's guy. He's like, he's not necessarily second in command, but he's been there the longest. He's the first one to get drawn through. Yeah, it makes sense.
He's the BFF. You know, and I figured if there's anyone who's going to be there with Roland to the very end, it was going to be Eddie. And then he dies, and man, because like everyone has something to lose with him. Susanna's lover, like Jake's older brother.
Friend. Yeah, older brother. Yeah.
Oh man, it was so brutal. And it was done in a way that is so great, because it's like, it wasn't during this huge showdown. They had already won. Like, it was done. And then it was like life, so blasé that it just like, the guy's like, I will take care of this one, gets up and shoots him in the head. As soon as he was like, I'm going to do it, I was like, Eddie's dead. No.
Well, it's funny because, on my first read through, and even on this second one, I was kind of just like, man, I don't know. This is a little bit of a hard sell, King, because Eddie has been training as a gunslinger. If you think about it, Eddie's always been a gunslinger if we want to get spacey again. But Eddie is like very well trained. It just sucks that he went out like that. You know what I mean? Like stray bullet, basically. Not really stray bullet, but I mean, like from the guy like lying down, there's like no fight in that. There's no.
Right. He's like, I'll get you. And then
and then he gets him. And so I wasn't a big fan of Eddie's death, really. Like, I mean, obviously, because we lost Eddie, but I wasn't really a big fan of like the way it went down. You know, I think it would have been cooler if he had died in some kind of like shootout or something. But I don't know.
There might
it's
be a
whatever.
subtle statement of like revenge is mine, so says the tower. You know, like if they would have died, then someone would have been like, I have to kill this person out of anger and revenge now, and like the point is to overcome that maybe.
Well, and I'm not trying to like rewrite this for King or anything, but I feel like there was no point. Maybe I read over it, but I don't think I did. But there were things happened like really quickly, and I feel like there should have been some kind of like big conversation, like, okay, are we still going to go do this? Like, Roland, do you still want to go to the tower? And then when Roland said he did, then it would have happened. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
there was no like test of whether or not Roland was going to keep going to the tower. But that's if my theory is correct. You know what I mean? So it felt weird. It just felt like they did this thing and then Eddie died. You know?
Right.
And maybe I just didn't want Eddie to die.
I mean, I agree with you. It was super anticlimactic, and maybe my like revenge, whatever. I think it's probably a little like spacey and just trying to justify it because I want everything to fit nicely in a neat little thing.
I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, and like you know,
maybe
Steven
this whole
is
story is just
grinding
Steven
this into us,
dude. Maybe though, like I know I went on like the whole tangent about like how endings aren't important and all that stuff, but maybe this is just Stephen King covering his own ass because he wrote a crappy ending to a series. But I don't think that's it. I like our explanation.
I agree,
but
completely.
I don't know.
The thing that
he said he was lazy in his own book. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, the thing that threw me about Eddie's death was the fact that he didn't just die. He like then comas for the next few hours with like everyone kind of moping around, and it seemed again just like, man, you already make it anticlimactic and you're just now like rubbing it into our faces a little.
But it gave Susanna a chance to say goodbye, which is really nice, you know?
Yeah.
That's good. And Jake. Speaking of anticlimactic,
dies.
While we're in kind of like this rut of kind of, you know, digging into what we weren't super big fans of with this book in particular. We can go through the series too later if you want to, but the last battle with fucking the Crimson King,
old Mr. Red. Yeah.
I thought that was so lame. Like it was just so like he's with this. For one thing, he's with Patrick Danville, who just got introduced like 100 pages ago.
This new guy,
you know, like it's
nothing.
like it's just whoever. I liked Patrick. I think Patrick was cool character. It was a very good idea to have him like this like magic artist. Basically, that was cool.
That was just rad.
I thought that was a nice touch to everything. But it's like for Roland to get to the tower, and none of the quartet are going to see the tower. But I guess that works with the whole ending thing, though.
No,
it's
it
like
does.
But
he's making his point too hard almost.
I know. It's like, can I just have something? Like, can I have somebody
have a flashy sword fight?
Yeah, nothing. Well, I mean, it's like there's explosions and stuff, and that's cool. But I mean, really, Roland is fighting just like a crazy dude. You know, he's just like. Yeah, like there's not really like a whole lot of dialogue or palaver, if you will. Even though I thought it was cool that the Crimson King was like, "Come up here, let's palaver, like let's talk about this." And Roland's just like, "No, we got to kill this guy right now." Right. I did like how Roland was like shooting every single one of the Sneetches like out of the sky.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, that was
a really pretty scene.
I liked that touch where Roland had always envisioned himself approaching the tower at sunset. And then he kind of like realizes why, and it's because he's being held up like this, and he wasn't really expecting that. You know, like this one last kind of hurdle that he has to jump, and he's so tired, and it's been such a long journey. He's lost so many people, and now he's got to deal with like this insane person that's throwing explosives at him. Right. He's got some like weird kid with him that he just met. You know, it's
like huddled behind a tree. Like, why?
It's just, I think that. The Patrick Danville thing, it felt like kind of, I guess, anticlimactic or just kind of weak that the last thing that Roland does before he goes into this tower he's been searching for so long is like tells this kid to get lost, basically. And it's like this new guy we've never even really spent that much time around. And it felt weird. Like it just didn't feel like as epic. But then Stephen King turns up the epicness by having Roland shout all the names of the people that he's been in, and then his own name, right?
That was the last part that made me cry.
Oh my god, that was so good.
It was like tears of epicness. I was like, yes.
Yeah, yes. Speaking of crying, what parts did you cry at? Because I had a couple for sure.
Oh man. Okay, before we move on from that real fast
Sure. Yeah.
Roland, I think, kind of weakly. I agree with everything you said, but or not Roland weakly. Stephen King kind of weakly covers his tracks where he's like sends the kid off by Roland not just blindly accomplishing his goal. He still like keeps in his mind, oh wait, I have another who's depending on me or who doesn't know how to live that I can help here. And so he like tells him, hey, grab as much food as you can, go do this, draw yourself a door if this one's not working. And he gives him kind of a plan, because the other guy, Patrick, has not lived outside of the his little chamber for a long time. So Roland does help him. But yeah, it's kind of weak.
I mean, it's nice that he helps him, but it's just like, who is this kid? Like, let's go. Come on.
Okay, before moving on again from just this like setting, he eliminates all but the eyes of the Crimson King. So what part of the Crimson King is left? Like it mentions briefly that he might send him into the place between worlds.
Yeah.
I don't get that, but his eyes are still there, obviously looking with rage and hate at Roland.
Yeah, I think that the eyes are there because the eraser couldn't erase the mixture of blood and flower petals. At least that's like how I was thinking.
The tower is forever.
Yeah, it was like, they can erase the Crimson King, but they're not going to erase all of him. And I don't know what the significance really.
Like, do you think it was sentient? Those sentient eyes just floating there forever?
Maybe, yeah. I think so. Which that's kind of messed up, but yeah.
Adds to my idea that it is Roland because he didn't complete his thing. It wasn't forever that he had to keep going around and around. If he would have stayed the course, he wouldn't. But because he didn't, he now has to suffer the fate he tried to avoid.
That's a really bonkers theory, and I think I need to think about that more before I.
So where did the Crimson King come from?
I don't know. Where did anybody come from? They're not all Roland.
Yeah, that's true. Everyone is Roland.
Everyone is Roland. What did you think about the last scene with Susanna and Jake and Oi and Eddie in New York drinking hot cocoa? Because when I was reading that, I couldn't read it because my eyes were so teary.
Yeah.
And I knew what was coming too. And man, that was a lot. That was really good.
That was a lot. I'm glad that he threw Oi in there. Oi is never forgotten, and I really love that.
Oh, yeah. Oi is part of the quartet.
I just feel like a lot of people wouldn't like include him as being like, I don't know. He just he gets a kiss on the mouth in the cave before they attack El Gulciento. It's just he's so important. He gets yelled. He's one of the names. Brave from Midworld. Like so
even Blaine
says
his name on the train.
Yeah. So I cried at that point. I cried Eddie's death. I cried at not at this point. I was kind of like just like used like everyone's dying. But I did cry at Jake's death, and
Jake's death was pretty brutal. That was a lot.
Brutal.
That was a lot.
Yeah, man, being hit by a car, like I don't know. I didn't really like that. Two things that I just wished would have been different happened. Yes, but been different was the way he died, and also Susanna leaving Roland. Like in my theory of him having to go through twice more, I fit it in there, and maybe that was just me wanting it to make sense to me, but I just I didn't like her leaving him, and I cried when she left him as well because it was kind of a death in its own way.
Yeah, going back to Jake, I'm not a big fan of the way Jake died either. I think it's weird. Not weird. I think it's lame. Lame is a really good word. I think it's lame that he was killed the same way that he died earlier in the series by getting hit by a car. And it's just like,
oh gosh, I like it less now even.
And like, it's like a Final Destination thing. No, it's not. It's a completely different situation.
Right.
It's a totally different car, totally different state, totally different driver. Like, is this kid just always gonna get hit by cars? Like, come on, man.
Right.
Give him something else.
Twice
by getting rolled over, and I don't like that. But I mean, obviously, the last conversation that him and Roland have, and Jake got to say goodbye to Oi, which is really nice. And while we're talking about deaths of mates, Oi, that was too much. He was impaled on a stick. Mm-hmm. And then Roland comes over and
halfway sucked dry.
Yeah, and then Roy's just like, Oland, and then he dies, damn it. And I felt like in that Oland, it was almost like this kind of like accusatory tone. Yeah. Did you get that vibe?
Oh, yeah.
It was like this loving kind of context, but also it was just like, Roland, you fucker, dude. That's like Oi is just, and it's interesting too because Oi could go with Susanna, but he chooses to stay with Roland.
Right.
And I'm wondering about that. Like, do you think Oi knew that he had to stay with Roland, or did he want to stay with Roland? Like, what do you think was up with that?
I think Oi was taking
Roland.
the road less traveled. He knew he needed to stay with Roland.
Yeah, I think
Roland was entering the unknown near the end, and everyone was leaving him. And Oi was like, "I'm taking one for the team." Like he was presented with a live happily ever after, and he decided to stay with like. Oi embodies all of the character we wish we had, you know.
Oh my
so
god!
I think it was a choice of not because he liked him more.
I didn't get that vibe really. Yeah, okay, yeah, he knew he had to be with him because he saved Roland's life.
Yeah, and he knew that Roland needed him, but the final Roland was death follows you. Roland, get it?
Yeah, get it. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, get it, man. Come on.
Yeah,
like let's. And even Eddie, to a certain extent, throughout the entire series, is just like, I'm so sick of your fucking jive, man. Like, I'm so sick of this. Like, your damn tower. And it's like when Eddie recognizes that horse in Wolves of the Kala and knows how to ride a horse and stuff, I feel like that's also kind of a nod that, like, Eddie knows Roland better than Eddie thinks he knows Roland. And something about the way that Roland talks about the tower.
What is your theory about why he can ride the horse? We've heard so many theories past that.
I mean, because Eddie's been here before. You know what I mean? Like Eddie's been here before. Susanna's been here before. I have heard the theory that he has different commates every time, but I don't subscribe to that. Yeah. I don't think that it's the same ones every time, in my opinion. Yep. And so the way that Eddie kind of like processes Roland's obsession with the tower, you know, it's like I feel like it's like some part of Eddie knows that Roland is going to make a bad decision again. It's going to lead to everybody's deaths, and it makes him uncomfortable. He doesn't like it, you know.
Right.
And even at the end of Drawing of the Three, when he's like, "We're going to get there. We're going to stand true," and it's even Eddie's just like, "No, we're not. No, this sucks. Like this.
You're going to let someone fall into a cavern again."
Yeah, again. You know you
so
are.
I didn't realize that their mission was over at the end of the Breakers. I was like, Roland's drive was so infectious, and he was so like, I didn't even realize that it was over at that point. You know, I thought the death of Eddie was more of a balancing because Walter was killed and so it was like this weird balancing thing. But like, you're totally right when you said like their mission is done, and I wish there would have been a conversation that it was like, hey, we did what we set out to do. Roland, are you going to let your drive, your like need to answer this question that you don't even really know what it is, kill everyone, you know? Like what if
and on this turning of the wheel he's going to, you know?
Yeah.
When I was doing the recap, there was like that whole part, like that castle where the 3 Stephen Kings come out. What was your reaction to that? Were you just like
there was a little too much Stephen King in this book,
but it's not Stephen King. Like, it's a glamour. It's like at the end of Contact where he's like, "I assumed the form of someone that you would know." You know what I mean? It's not.
Yeah.
It wasn't more Stephen King, but it was like more. I love how they're all wearing pea coats for some reason. It's such an odd visual. But yeah, what did you think about that whole part with Thoughtful and the 3 Stephen Kings and the castle and everything? Like that was a really vivid image in my head. Like it was really visually really cool, but that was weird.
It was weird.
That was like one of the weirdest parts of the book.
It was so weird. And like I kind of feel like it was King's way of just being like, I need to explain some like backstory and like some other things need to be explained here before we wrap this up. So here, have this, I guess. I don't know. It was odd. What did you think about it?
I don't know. I feel like it was kind of a way to build up the Crimson King a little bit more before we got to him. I think maybe it felt like it was kind of added in after the fact almost, where like King got to the Crimson King part in Cancano Ray and was like, no one even knows who this guy is. Like right. I need to at least like let's get like a counselor or something, someone that's actually like been around him, like, you know.
Right.
But it is a really cool part for all its weirdness, and it's pretty short too. And then like that really chilling part where they hear a scream behind them, and it's Mordred, and then like the conversation between him and Mordred was interesting for sure. And yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah, I did like the wrapping up of Mordred's tale, his line there. And I liked what did you think of Mordred killing Walter? Did you think that was a little anticlimactic? Like, there's this bad guy that's really being built up, and then he just ends by being like sucked like a Capri Sun without like Roland even really knowing, besides feeling it, you know?
I thought it worked. I mean, it's kind of poetic in that it's
very poetic.
in that it's Roland's kid in a way. You know, it's like Roland's offspring is gonna take it out, take Walter out. Because I think that Walter would have been expecting some sort of like attack from Roland, and it would have like been this kind of like even fight almost, maybe, or something. But then Mordred kind of just coming in and being like a kind of chaotic element to everything, and kind of like a wild card. I liked how King wrote Mordred as like kind of watching them all the time. That was cool.
Kind of sad about it. Being on the outside.
He's like, that kid's not doing good. You know? Like, he's not doing okay.
Kid's not doing good.
But it was just like a nice extra element to everything. I didn't really like that he kind of just like gets to Roland and then dies. You know, I thought they would maybe have a little bit more of a palaver, or like there would be something that Mordred does that Roland was missing, or something like that, you know, like that was kind of made there. Yeah, like that kind of made Mordred more important than he was. He was still important, but I think that Mordred kind of watching them, kind of just being like this creepy, like hybrid spider presence that's all messed up, it was cool. It was kind of like this element of like, okay, when is Mordred going to show up? They're going to have to deal with this at some point. Like,
right.
And then he kills one of the commates and stuff. I think Mordred is pretty well used, if not a little bit, just kind of like, I wish there had been a little bit more to it, because it had been built up for a while. Then it happened. Mordred. But I don't know, I think it works.
He's the lesson also that evil always eats itself. You know, like at the end of the day, it can't last ever, because
it can't last.
So
that's interesting.
Okay, Roland warns King right after he gets hit with the truck.
Yeah,
and Jake is like, which is cool, because Roland tries to stay with Jake through his death. He's like, screw that guy, and Jake is like, no, go, like leave me in the chasm, basically, which was cool. But he tells King, there'll be a woman who comes your way. She'll be fair. She may speak to you about the ease and the pleasure of the clearing. She may call herself Morphia, daughter of sleep, or Selena, daughter of the moon, but refuse her, even if you are tempted by her eyes and breasts. Thanks, King. Who is he talking about? Like, what is he talking about?
Yeah, sure. So in the kind of like mythos or lore from the world Roland was raised in, specifically like Gilead, those two are sort of like death goddesses.
Okay.
And according to that lore, they like to tempt men into the clearing at the end of the path before it's their time to go there. So Roland was essentially telling Stephen King, like, look, you're banged up, you're really close to death right now. So if you see, for our purposes, like a bright light, say, it's gonna look really attractive, but don't give in to the temptation to die before your time, is basically what he was saying. I think it was a way of King almost like telling the reader that Stephen King's life is still kind of in the balance. You know what I mean? Because I don't think that King wanted the reader to be assured that Stephen King was okay. So I think that was kind of like a line to at least carry along a little bit more like apprehension on the reader's part, maybe.
Okay.
And it's just like a cool bit of like Roland talking really cool again, you know.
I just thought it was like, who are these characters that are trying to subvert the tower plan? Are there more? But it wasn't about that at all.
It's like it's a cool thing that Roland does, where he kind of like slips into his old mannerisms and high speech and stuff like that. It's like when he was like yelling at that child of Roderick. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he like commanded him, you know, and it was just like this really badass part. So he just kind of like slips in and out of that every now and then. And I think that was like part of it.
I love that though. It's like reminds you like, oh, he is of the line of kings, you know? He's like Aragorn. Speaking of that, what are the Child of Roderick? Who are they?
I'm pretty sure the children of Roderick are slow mutants that kind of like wander around Midworld and are kind of like a consequence of the tower's degradation and the world moving on. They still obey the line of Eld, And one of them, Hallis, I think was his name, was pretty instrumental in stopping the breakers because he was the one that set all those sneeches out. He was the one that showed up in the cave with Shimi. So they're like loyal to the line of Eld, basically, but kind of got messed up because of everything that's going on. And so Roland can kind of like recognize them, and they can. It's a weird part that's not explained really in the book.
Okay, yeah, because it seemed like he was like implanted with these commands.
Not necessarily implanted, I guess, but just like ready to obey Roland and recognize
genetically loyal.
I guess. I don't know. It's weird. Okay. Whatever.
Okay.
I feel like that's a better explanation than what it deserved, honestly.
I liked the reminder that he is basically Aragorn, which was cool.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the turtle.
The turtle?
What is that? Yeah, not only the turtle beam.
Maturin or the Scrimshaw turtle?
This both kind of like, because obviously they're one and the same. Like, why does it have power? Where did Susanna get it? I forget.
Okay. So the Scrimshaw turtle or Skolpada or whatever
nice
was
memory, dude.
Skolpada was in the bowling bag with what it says like nothing but strikes at Midtown or Midworld Lanes written on it, like depending on where they were or whatever. So it was in the bag when Susanna and Mia came through the door into 1999. So I think it was put there by Maturin, the turtle guardian, who they seem to be able, like these bigger like powers at play seem to be able to kind of like intervene now and then. I don't really know. It's just there. But I'm pretty sure
this serves the beam.
I don't know. Like the source of power seems to come from Maturin, who is one of the guardians of the beams. Fun fact too: Skolpada is actually Swedish for turtle, which is why the Swedish guy that Susanna and Mia met called it that, and then that's kind of like what it was referred to after that. So that's kind of like why it's called. It's like Scrimshaw turtle and also Skolpada.
Okay,
which is also just like Stephen King, like why you got people like meeting Swedish people and changing the names for stuff, and like what did you do?
Oh my gosh, why? Like the Guardians of the Beams really are terrible at their jobs.
A lot of this is so open-ended, and people have been speculating about it for years, and so a lot of this is like I'm gonna say the words like my theory is like a lot in this episode, and I already have, and I know that Chad's gonna do it too, so just little footnote there for everybody. But
like who knows?
my theory is that the Guardians of the Beam, like, so Shardik was like corrupted basically by North Central Positronics, but then like Maturin is like fine kind of, but like the beam can only work if like both ends of it are being held up, right? And I'm pretty sure Shardik's beam collapsed when they were in Calabrian Sturgis. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's one of the beams that did collapse.
You're right, because they were on the path of that one.
But Maturin, I don't think that these like gods or like Kai Mei or whatever they're called, or Kanta, I think is what they're called. I don't know.
I think it's Kanta.
I think that they have like a certain amount of influence and ability to intervene in things, but like it's just kind of whatever, you know. I don't know. I think that it's just weird god stuff, and now they have a turtle, you know.
Okay.
They just do.
I don't know if it was
pretty weak.
that beam when they were in Calabrian Sturgis, because there's a thing where somebody asks like, was it that one? And he was like, no, if it was the one that we were on, like,
oh, you're totally right. Yeah,
right?
It was a different. It was like an adjacent beam.
Yeah, okay,
beam
adjacent.
You're right. You're right. But Shardik was still like totally corrupted.
Totally corrupted. It's crazy too. Remember, I asked a question many episodes ago. This just like occurred to me, where I was like, what is Eddie doing? Where he was like at the Shardik scene where they destroyed all of Shardik's little like robot things, and he like peers through a door or something, and he like hears some like chaos on the other end, and he says something like really poetic that just pops into his brain. That gets like answered in this book. I'm doing a very terrible job of explaining this because I don't remember the exact words, but do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the part in Wastelands where they see the little creatures, and then Eddie puts his ear up against that like door thing.
Yeah,
I remember that.
He was and this is where I remember he sees the other side of that door when he's in Fedek in the castle.
Oh, I didn't really put that together. Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure he's like, yeah, this is the other side of that door. That was the impression that I got.
That. Yeah. No, you're totally right. I think you're right about that. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, way to bring it back home. You know, wow. Okay. What are the Todash chimes and where do they come from? And is it just like a magic essence that serves the beam?
So Todash is so weird. Okay, so
Yeah.
the chimes, I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of like it's like the sound that you hear when you're transitioning between states.
Okay.
That's at least as much as I'm aware of. I don't know if it signifies like precognition or anything like that. I don't know
Right,
really
like a
much
vision
about,
is happening.
but I do know that like
Thinking.
the Todash, like Todash is really weird. The Prim is weird. Like all that.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, like the Prim is like the if you think of like the Prim as like an ocean, right? It was like this oceanic, like magical essence that had kind of like infused into everything, right? And then it was receding, and then it kind of like left behind like thinnies and all this weird shit. And then like
Oh yeah, right, right, right.
like
The
and
sound
like
thing. Okay.
the Todash space is like the opposite of that, like the shadow version of that. It's I could be super wrong about that. I'm pretty sure that's what that is. And then so like the Todash darkness is like if you get caught in that transitory state, like there's like monsters in there that can eat you and stuff, and like even when they're under I think it's Castle Discordia, when Roland and Susanna and Oy are down there, there's all these doors with there's like weird sounds coming out of them and stuff. Like one of those monsters like slips out of one of those doors and is chasing them, right? So you don't want to be in the Todash darkness, you know. So every time they're crossing through that, it's very dangerous. You know what I mean? They're like basically crossing over an abyss of monsters every time. And I think the chimes are kind of like this weird way of telling you like, hey, you're in this space right now. So, or you're about to be in this space or whatever. I don't know. Okay. It's spacey.
Is that where the Crimson King gets sent to? Is the darkness in between?
I think that's where he is, but also those eyes are still left behind too. I think that was the intention.
Right.
Which is kind of messed up, honestly.
Oh,
but the Crimson King maybe deserved it. I don't know. I can't make that call.
Yeah, like I said, it matches my it's Roland because he was trying to avoid forever, and then he ends up suffering it because he avoided his cop path.
You're not going to let that go.
No, I think it's a good theory. I'm confused when Mia and Susanna physically become two people. When and how? I don't know if you can even answer the how, but like when does that happen?
So Susanna and Mia were one body until Richard Sayre called them to the Dixie Pig, and then they went through the door to Fedig. So then they were separated into two bodies.
So going through the door, they were two people going out.
Yeah, at no point while they were in 1999 New York were they ever two bodies. They were though. They were. It's implied that they were separated when they got to Fedig.
Got it.
Yeah,
maybe the mechanism was
they still shared some sort of like mental link. But while they were in Fedig and Mia was giving birth, they were in separate bodies.
Got it. Okay. And then the mental link is maybe even strengthened by the machine that they put on.
That was really...
I don't know why.
Let's just really quickly kind of glance over this, because I forgot about the whole birth season, the whole birth scene in this book. And... while I was reading it, I was like, I can't believe that I have the platform that I have, and I'm telling everybody to go read it. I'm like, this series is amazing, and I'm like, man, some people are going to be pretty annoyed with me.
I can see why you forgot some of those things, like Forgot and Forgiven, because the rest is so amazing and brilliant, but there is some whack.
Yeah, like
disgusting.
That whole part was really vivid. And it was excruciating detail that like this woman gives birth to this half spider, half baby thing, and then it crawls up and sucks all her juices out of her. And she's like really happy about it. It's just oh god.
She's like my chappy. It's already gross.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Oh,
it's a lot. So we're just gonna bounce right off of that, and it's fine. You know, whatever.
I stopped eating. I had to come back to my food later.
So gross.
Literally. Okay, why was Odetta's grandfather, Moses Carver, selected as a member of the Tet Corporation? Like, he wasn't in the story. Why is he trusted?
So Moses Carver is Susanna's godfather. So he was like her dad's really good friend that had like started Holmes Dental along with her dad. I think like a business partner of some sort, godfather, like just like family friend who she was really close with. remember in Wolves of the Kala when the Katet starts formulating a plan out. I think it's after the first time they go through the Toadash state, but they kind of formulating this plan to get a hold of Moses Carver because he has access to Susanna's inheritance.
Right, and they can use that to buy the property, right?
Yeah, the vacant lot to keep the rose safe and stuff. That's not quite how it all goes down, but that's kind of like it's someone that she trusts. And then when they are talking to John Cullum, they're kind of like, go find this guy because we still trust him and he's still got the access to all this stuff and he can help you found the Tet Corporation. So yeah, I mean, he's a connection to Susanna. He's kind of part of all this. If you think about it, he's like an honorary Katet member, just like John Cullum. Like, you know how in this book, Eddie is kind of like something about that John Cullum guy, right? And even Roland is just like, yeah, that guy's important. You know, like that guy's going to help us. And even John Cullum is like, I don't know what it is, y'all, but I'm here. Like, I'm here to help you guys. Like, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I'm here. And I think that Moses Carver is kind of the same way, you know? So they're not like quite, it's kind of like with, Father Callahan, like he's not part of the Katet, but he's kind of part of the Katet. There's like a larger, like not as core Katet.
Yeah,
kind of,
like
so
Katet
that's how
adjacent.
I look at it. Yeah, that's how I look at it. At least like they're involved. They're part of the White. They're here. They're here to help. Even Stephen King, to an extent, I feel like as a medium through which the tower is telling its own story to keep itself upright or whatever. Stephen King is also part of the White, but he kind of wrote himself to be kind of a piece of shit, which I thought was really funny.
Totally, he was going out of his way to make sure he wasn't going to be accused for being self-aggrandizing.
That was my theory, and that was my theory in the episode previous, is that Stephen King had initially maybe had himself as John Cullum. And then was like, all right, I got to back up off of that maybe and like not have that be, I got to like invent a whole new character.
It's like master plan corporate.
Yeah, like I'll just be like this lazy idiot that's telling the story.
You keep mentioning the White. What is, expound on that a little bit?
I don't really.
Obviously like the good forces.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I think it almost means like the well-intentioned, the ones that want to keep the universe going. You know, I don't think it necessarily means like gunslingers. I think it's just like the party in this whole situation that doesn't want to dismantle the tower, the ones that the working forces that understand what's at stake and are working to not let that happen. Essentially, that's what I look at it as. Like the White is never really explained, but it's like White versus Red. You know, so like there's like the Crimson King and everybody on his end, and then there's a certain like duality there. But I really loved when Moses gives Roland back the cross that Aunt Talitha gave him. It was just so sweet. Like Roland wasn't expecting it. And it was just, it felt to me like almost where it was like the first time Roland actually kind of felt confident he was going to get to the tower. That's kind of what it felt like to me, where it's like he had this cross and he's like, oh yeah, I need to bring this cross to the tower. That's like another reason on top of everything else. Ka brought me this cross back. Like maybe Ka's on my side here. It's kind of how I saw it.
Like, I agree with you. Like, maybe I never actually lost or left the path of the beam. I'm still on Ka's trail.
Yeah, he's not supposed to be going to it, but that was his first. Like, it felt like he was confident about it with Talitha's cross. It's like a talisman.
I liked that whole New York sequence.
Yeah, it was good. The Back to New York chapter.
Yeah, we had a little touchy feelies in there. Like you said, it's kind of his realization and confidence. It's also... It's funny how often Roland gets laid throughout the course of the story.
I know, it's so funny.
Like, he just kind of throws it in there, you know? He's like, and Roland's getting laid again.
Yeah. But this time it was more like it was an interesting way of doing it, because the first night that him and Irene Tassenbaum were together, they didn't even have sex. They just kind of like held each other for a little while. And I thought that was really sweet. Like, Roland just wanted some contact, and he this woman was nice, and you know, he just watched Eddie and Jake die. Man, he's not doing great, and he just kind of like hung out with her. But I love how Stephen King just like had to throw in that like this woman just fucking loves Roland. Like,
yeah,
it's like, oh man, if I had another few days with this guy, I'd take him and ride his dick off. Like, let's go. You know, like she's like married.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh.
Whatever, it's fine.
It was just like, you had to do it.
Yep, you had to do it.
There's a point where he even throws in, like, totally doesn't need to be there, but is like his sizable, girthy, like, talking about, like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, of course. Stephen, sure.
Of course.
Before we move on kind of past this, as this kind of ties into everything, let's just talk about John Cullum for a second, because he was an awesome character and I loved him.
I love John Cullum too. Yeah, he's fantastic. He's got that thick Maine accent. You gotta go
that
down.
We kept being reminded of. I love it.
Yeah, it's really fun when Stephen King kind of embraces the whole the Maine thing. You know, you gotta go down to that road and go to Cara laughs. I can't do it. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can really do it. Don't bury your son in the Indian burial ground. Sorry, that's from Pet Sematary. Don't do it. Yeah, sometimes dead is better.
Is better.
It's a weird accent.
It is weird because it's not quite like Boston. It's not New York. I was just gonna say I really dislike when someone has I shouldn't say annoying voice, but a very different voice, and it's in every sentence. It's like we get it, you know. Allow my imagination to do it. Sprinkle it.
Yeah, Brian Jocks does that constantly with like the moles. You know,
so annoying. It's like, we get it.
Oh, I want to go dig all these so hole in the ground. It's like, dude, can you please not write it like that anymore? I think the extent of like how much I'm willing to put up with that kind of stuff is like Hagrid and Harry Potter, like the way that J.K. Rowling, like that's about as much of that as I can handle, you know. But like when people write out the accents, I'm right there with you. It's so annoying.
Just remind me from time to time.
And that's what King does in here. He's like, he has the regular dialogue, and then he'll say like road, but it's like pronounced red, like R-U-D, and then he carries on with the conversation, you know, which is really nice.
Yeah, there's I forget the book, but it might even be Brian Jacques, where a character writes really slow or talks really slow, and it's like every word is a like sentence long, and you're like, oh my gosh, I hate this. Okay, I love John Cullum for a lot of reasons. The first of which being he just like picks up, like he like finds himself in the middle of a gunfight and he's just like, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really cool.
But then, you know, yes, you can say King uses very heavily and perhaps even abuses the idea of Ka, just like Ka, you know, to answer all the questions. But like he still asks questions that if you were in that situation, you would want to know. Like Eddie is just like Roland's like Ka all the way, whatever. But Eddie's like, why are you doing this? Why are you saying yes to all of this? And I really appreciated that he did that and kind of put himself in the mind of someone not Roland.
Yeah, Eddie is still kind of like, all right, I'm from this kind of world, maybe not this exact universe, but I'm from here. You're acting weird, like you're too into this. But he didn't have a problem with it or anything. But Eddie was definitely just like, there's something about this Cullum guy,
right?
And yeah, I thought it was just really, I'm going to use this word, enchanting. It was enchanting that,
yes,
like the way that Cullum and Eddie interacted, the way that Cullum and Roland interacted, the way that Eddie and Roland together interacted with Cullum, it really did feel like he was an honorary quartet member that was really wanted to help and was really here for it. Yeah, he's so cool. Yeah.
Enchanting was a nice word, and Cullum's response was like, well, there's also, you know, kind of feels like someone's just handing you the keys to a big old engine, and wouldn't you want to turn it on and see what it does? Like, I will say I didn't get at all the ending of their time with John, where he can't leave this like bubble area, and they see this light portal just opening up for, I guess, in the forest, and all these like things are going in. They just like run into this portal and like.
That's really
what?
Dumb. Yeah,
like,
even on my second read through. Yeah, even on my second read through, and I was just like, okay, cool. I mean, it's behind number 19 on Turtleback Lane. Fine. That's fine, but like also, come on, like this portal up, whatever. They're going through it. We got to get them back to FedEx. Who cares?
Oh, he kind of does the same thing when they're driving in the car, where he's like, "And I need them to be over here where Pierre Callahan's dying." So, boom.
Yeah, no, you know what? Well, speaking of driving in cars, I kind of want to go over Stephen King's saving or whatever, his rescue, I should say. I think it's weird that Jake has the touch, right? Jake can influence the minds of other people. Why do you make that guy pee? Great point. Why did they make him pee? Like, make him do something. Make him take a nap. Make him have a flat tire. No, I guess he can't really control that. But like, make him want to do something other than peeing for 15 seconds and then getting back in his car and speeding down the road. Like, come on. Really? I don't
Right.
know. Maybe Jake's touch isn't good enough to make somebody take a nap, but it's good enough
I
to make
don't
him
know.
pee. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then he
And
dies
like,
for it. So
yeah, that's true.
I
But
don't
like,
know.
couldn't he use his touch to like, warm the guy before he like does the whole thing, like, prevent the whole thing
Yeah,
from
like maybe
happening?
tell him like, hey, stop the car and like sleep it off, or like sit there for half an hour or whatever. Go back
Right.
for more Mars bars. I don't know. Yeah, that just felt like if any part of this book felt like kind of manufactured and fabricated, it was like the portal behind Kara laughs for sure, and then Jake just only having enough of the touch to make someone pee. Like, okay, like
Okay,
come
sure.
on, man. But whatever.
While you mentioned 19 there on 19 Turtleback Lane, hit me with the 19 juice. Why 19? I don't get it.
Okay, so this is my understanding of it. First of all, Stephen King started writing what would become The Gunslinger at the age of 19. So that's significant. I don't know how important it is, but it's significant. I think I read somewhere that Stephen King's favorite number is 19, and it has been his whole life. So
I think he's afraid of 19s. I think I
might
read
be
that
afraid of it.
somewhere.
19's a weird number. So yeah.
Hmm.
Also, okay, so the Keystone world, the world where time only flows in one direction, is I think it's associated with the number 19, and I think
Don't
it
get
might
that
be.
either.
I think at one point, Eddie says something like, "This is the 19th level of the Dark Tower." So I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to get into this the best that I can. So I think that it's Gon or the Prim or Ka or the Tower or the Guardians or whatever trying to tell the Quartet when they need to be paying attention to something, right? So it's like a way of translating like what world this is to these like humans that can understand numbers, and you know what I mean? So it's like a way of kind of, they need to keep an eye out and stay aware of anything that has to do with 19, because that's a hint as to like where they need to be. It's like a compass, you know what I mean? It's like,
sure.
this is the direction you're going to want to go. Pay attention to this. I also think that to a certain extent, it's King giving nods to the Dark Tower series and his other work that's related to it. There's like the number 19 on like license plates and other books and stuff like that. It's kind of a way of like communicating to the reader, like, this is a nod to the Dark Tower. This is one of the books that's in the Dark Tower universe. You're in the King fandom. It's like it's used in a narrative way in this series, obviously, and probably some other books and stuff, like in like a very sparse, like not
Subtle.
super significant way, subtle kind of way that sheds light on the relation of that book to the series, or it's just a nice, fan servicey thing. But
right. It's like brandy, like it's a brand thing.
Yeah, kind of. But yeah, 19. It's an indication that this is something to do with the Keystone world, and they should probably pay attention to it. That's how I look at it, at least.
Did you start looking for 19s everywhere?
Yeah, actually, that's funny that you mentioned.
I wasted
that
some time.
You don't want to get into numerology because it will take over. You remember that movie, The Number 23, with Jim Carrey? Have you seen that movie?
Yes, I think weird. Yes.
It's kind of a dumb movie, but at the same time, like a lot of the connections that he makes, it's just. But we do that with everything, so we do it. It's like the blue car thing. When you buy a blue car, you see 19 everywhere. But like, I was watching TV just yesterday, and somebody said like there are 19 of those, and I was like, oh, is that Dark Tower related? But it wasn't. But maybe it was. Maybe I should do some research. I don't even remember what I was watching. Oh no, I was watching Game of Thrones, and somebody said there are 19 castles along the wall, but only 3 of them are manned. And I was like, Georgie boy, Mr. Martin. Mr. R.R. Martin, why'd you pick 19, George? What are you doing? Is the Dark Tower universe connected to A Song of Ice and Fire? Is Westeros one of the levels of the Dark Tower? And if you think about it, every world in an infinite universe. Okay, we're getting spacey again.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
It is all
but yeah, I was
stories.
seeing it all the time. And I did it on my first read through, and then I did on this one too.
I just stopped myself.
Yeah, you should probably stop.
Yeah, because I was literally like, a new character would come in, and I would like take each one of the letters of their name and figure out what position of the alphabet it was in, assign it the number, and then start adding them together. And then if I like take the first 3 and add them, it goes past 19. But if I take this one, I'm like, I was finding 19s where there was no 19.
Yeah, 19's a prime number too, so it's kind of like odd. It's a weird number.
It's a weird number.
Prime numbers are weird.
Yeah, there's an actual fear of there's a name for the fear of 19, which is why I think Stephen
Oh,
King's afraid of it because I read that in relation to him,
oh,
I believe.
didn't know that.
Okay. Here's a question for you. Riddle me this, Mr. I've read tons of Stephen King's is, and I feel very clever about making this connection. Maybe is Dandello Pennywise?
Okay, we're here. We're here. We're at this conversation.
We're here.
Okay. Yeah, this is really interesting, and I might go on about this for a little while. So.
Dude, please.
Okay, yeah. So there's been a lot of speculation about the Dandelo character, and a lot of people have thought it was literally Pennywise, but Stephen King has said that they're two separate entities, though of the same species that comes from the Toadash space. So Pennywise is from the Toadash space. The Dark Tower and it are linked together, like they are. It is one of the books that's connected to the Dark Tower. So another interesting thing that kind of lends a lot of credibility to the theory that they're twinners, that Pennywise and Dandelo are twinners, is that the robot, Stuttering Bill, like the guy that hangs out around the house and helps with the generator and stuff, he could be the twinner of Bill Denbrough, who is one of the main kids in it. And Bill Denbrough has a stutter in that book. He's stuttering. They don't call him Stuttering Bill, but it is a Bill who stutters. And so that's interesting.
And a twinner is like the other side of the same coin sort of thing? Is that like?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a twin. It's like a variation. Variation. So in an infinite universe, you and I have twinners, you know?
Sure.
So I also don't want to spoil it for you, Chad, or for anyone listening, but at the very end, there is a turtle involved in the ending of it. And a lot of people, including myself, believe that turtle is literally Maturin, the guardian of the beam. So there's that. There's a big astral turtle.
It's one of my favorite scary movies, by the way. I love it.
Did you see the reboot?
Yeah, I loved it.
It's really good. Part 1 is really good. Part 2 is not great. But
I never saw that one, but
part 1 is awesome. It's really
amazing.
Good. Yeah, the ending of it is really weird for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, I would also say that the core group of kids in it are quartet. Like they share a really special bond, and a lot of things in that book sort of line up in weird ways that points to Ka or Gan or whatever. So yeah, it is tied to the Dark Tower. At least I'm pretty sure it is. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
I was so proud of myself for noticing that because I loved the movie so much. So I was like, oh my gosh, I think so. And doesn't it survive off of fear? Whereas the other, his twinner, survives off of laughter.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So Pennywise and Dandelo are twinners. Let's just go with that. It's cooler to just be sure of it. So I'm sure of it. Yeah.
I love the idea of the Toadash space now that I think it's really confusing, but since you've explained it to me, it's like an infinite. It's so clever because he created a infinite bucket of bad guys that he. Can pull
that's
from.
Did you watch that movie, The Mist?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
like a long time ago.
It's a really good movie. The one with the guy that plays the Punisher.
Yeah.
So in the book and in the movie, the government, like the Mist, is like this creepy mist that has a bunch of. You didn't know the Mist was Stephen King?
No.
Yeah, he's done it all. But yeah, so in that movie and in the book, the government allegedly is like conducting experiments around this small town, and it lets in all this mist, and then all these monsters come through the mist, right? They opened up the Toadash space. So you should reread it or watch it again. And go like, dude, that movie, I need to watch The Mist again. That movie's awesome. It's really scary. Good. Those monsters are really creepy.
Yeah, when they're like in the grocery. Oh man,
the ending of that movie is.
I don't remember the ending. It's how long ago it was.
You should watch it again and talk about it with me on the Monday episode.
I need someone to watch it with me. I can't watch it alone. Is it just me, or is this the only book in the series, really, I think, that the voice telling the story like specifically turns to the reader and like directs us directly?
Oh, I'm so glad that you noticed that too. I'm so happy. I loved it. I loved it so much. It's great.
Meta on top of the meta.
It's meta on meta on meta. We're making a meta salad here, everybody. Yeah. Okay, so I really, really enjoyed it because it gave me the impression that Stephen King has, in the book, but also ours, but also all the Stephen King's, has finally like consciously decided to finish the story and like sort of accepting not just the story and his finishing it, but the ending as well, and like the reader's involvement in the ending. So he's almost like acknowledging the constant reader. You know, he's acknowledging us, and he's saying, "Okay, you're here. I'm here to write this. We're doing this together." And it was absent in the books previous. So at least
Totally.
if it wasn't it was like one time or something like that. But in this, it happens a lot. Actually, it's like let's go do this now. Let's go look at this now. See this now, and it's perfect. It really is a good representation, in my opinion, of the author, the writer, the medium of the Dark Tower finally sitting down and getting the job done and including the reader. It's awesome. It's so good. It's brilliant.
That's a really good answer, because I was like, it was so weird, kind of. I liked it because he would give me little insights, and he would also like apologize for things. And he'd be like, well, guys, like your answer was very good. And it was also an acknowledgement of like, I'm a victim in this.
Yeah, he's part of it. Yeah, it's just as much as you.
Yeah.
Just as much as Roland, just as much as Susannah and Jake and Eddie and Oi and all the other people that died horribly.
Right, and like he apologizes for us like not giving us an answer to Patrick's fate. He's like, who knows? I don't know, but this is the end that I'm involved here, you know?
It kind of gives him, as the author, like the ability to, I think like Daniel Handler or like Lemony Snicket does that a lot in the series of Unfortunate Events books, because he's writing as Lemony Snicket. I mean, his name is Daniel Handler, but he's writing as I think he's a journalist or like a writer or whatever. But there's a lot of parts in a series of Unfortunate Events where he kind of like takes you aside as a reader, and he's just like, you're not going to like this, but this is how it happened, you know? And I feel like Stephen King kind of does that sometimes too. And it's kind of like a way of making him, as the writer, writing the writer. He's a character writing the character that he is, but he's also a character when we're reading it. And it's meta on meta. It's a cheeseburger.
Meta sandwich.
So good. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad I'm glad that didn't occur the entire series, and I just noticed it at the end, because at the end it's like, man, this is happening a lot, and I love it. But and it kind of made his involvement in the story better, in my opinion.
Yeah. So when Susanna and Oi and Roland get to like that little village thing or whatever, and they meet the old man, Collins, I think it was Joe Collins, right? And it says like Odd Lane, but there's an apostrophe S added to it, right? And like Odd Lane is a I can't remember what the word is when a bunch of letters spell something else.
An anagram?
Matter. Hey, anagram. There you go.
Nice.
Wait, yes. Is that what that is?
I don't know. Anagram might be the same.
Oh wait, I think
as backwards.
I think that's what. It doesn't matter. So they get there, and this really nice old man walks out. And it's kind of like, oh, cool! They met a friend. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
But like, at what point reading that did you start to get as suspicious as Susanna was?
At this point of the story, I was pretty skeptical of everything.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Nothing close
nothing
to the
good
tower
is gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
So I was pretty like, okay, I've got my. I even thought maybe perhaps Patrick was evil for a while.
Okay,
I was fully behind Roland's decision to not accept the robot's trolley trip to the tower.
That was a good call. It's like walking has worked for us just fine.
Yeah. Like that thing's gonna be like, Blaine is back, and drive him off a cliff or something. You know, just nope. When did you the first read through?
It was pretty immediate, really, because I mean, like I was so in tune with Susanna by that point. Susanna is just really quick, you know. She sees that horse, and there's something about like the horse that doesn't make sense to her. It's like starved, but like this guy has been eating, and like the guy's just like, don't worry about the horse. Like that horse is just all fucked up, and she's just like, why though? What's up with this horse? Yeah, and then just the inside, it was too cozy. It was too. They were sitting and palavering, and it was too good. And then I feel like once Susanna saw how much Roland was laughing, and even before she thought it was weird, I kind of thought it was weird, because I was just like, Roland hasn't laughed this much this entire book. Why is he laughing this much now? Right. You know, it's like what this guy is saying isn't really that funny. Like it's kind of.
I thought he was drugged or something.
Yeah, that would have been kind of interesting. But the whole like, soaking up their laughter thing is way cooler than like poison or whatever.
Totally. And like very Monsters Inc-esque, like nice nod. And with Stephen King, like she finds the letter warning her, right, in the medicine cabinet. And was him just like I wrote that into the story, himself in Maine was like wrote that in.
Yeah, it's interesting because like if he has that much influence,
yeah.
Like how much influence does he have? Can he just like transport them directly to the tower or
right? Like they find a door that just takes them to the top of the tower.
If you think about it, I mean, it's like he kind of like broke his own world, but did he though? Because he wrote everything else. And like, I don't know. It's like, if you think about it, every single thing that they are interacting with was written by him too. So it stands to reason that he'd be able, but then it's like, okay, but then why didn't you give them more things that would help them? Like, give them jetpacks or something. Like, what do you, I don't know. It's kind of like the Eagles to Mordor thing, where it's like, it's because they didn't, like, I don't know.
Right. And like, Stephen even says himself, he's not telling the story. It's being pulled from him. So
that's the way better point than everything I just said too. Like that's actually the answer to that. So
yes, but it's also
a narrative like supported answer to that question.
Yeah.
Nice
but still, but it's kind of weird that it's kind of weird that he like, so the story that it was pulled from him had him breaking it gets deep, man. There's a lot of similarities between Pierre Callahan and Ted Brautigan.
Oh, Ted Brautigan?
Brautigan, yeah.
Yeah.
And Ted mentions that Jake has an uncanny resemblance to someone he knows.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. Who is that?
I don't know what the hell that was. The whole Algo Ciento part was not my favorite. It's probably my least favorite part of the whole like the build up to it. Like Ted starts telling a story and it's just like, holy shit, dude, are we doing another one of these? Like I know
it's like story in a story.
Like the first time I read through this, I was like, this guy better tell like a page long story. I can't do another like 200 pages of somebody doing something else. Like, come on, man. Like we're at the end. Can we please not do this right now? Then thankfully it was pretty short. But yeah, I don't know. That part was just like kind of boring. It was cool to see Shimi again. Poor Shimi, by the way, too. Like that's another really good example of how ruthless Roland can be, because there was a part where like Shimi dies and Roland was like, yeah, I knew that was going to be the last time he was going to be able to do that. I knew he was going to die. And it's like, dude, come on, man. Like God, you're such an ass. Like you're so doesn't any of this make sense to you, Roland? Aren't you wondering why everybody keeps dying? Like read the room, man. Like you're not supposed to be here.
When he asks for the child of Roderick, even Ted's like, well, will you kill him if he doesn't like he's like
maybe.
Yeah. He's like yes, like right away.
Jeez. But yeah, that whole part, the Algo Ciento part, there's so many characters that are just kind of, it's like a flash, they're just there, and there's like a name, and you read over it, and it's like, all right, I guess, and then it's probably got some significance, but there's so much, like, there's so many new faces and so many new terms, and then we're in Algo Ciento with the people that are running the place, and they're talking about random shit that doesn't matter, and it's like, dude, this is so much, like, we're stagnant again.
Chapters from them.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
It felt like the most stagnant part of the book, which I mean, I really love this book. It's one of my favorite Dark Tower books, but it's just that part. But and it's funny because it's so much stagnation before a really cool part, which is them freeing the breakers and stuff, and then Eddie dying, and it's like climactic and good, and it fits, and it's necessary. It needs to happen. But yeah, the whole part before that is just, I don't know. It's just like a lot of talking and a lot of like Susanna talks to Roland for a little while, and then like Eddie talks to Roland for a little while, and like Eddie talks to Jake for a little while. And
I think it felt like, stagnant to you because it was the second time. Because it felt stagnant a little, but like I was so like, what? Finally, I thought the breakers were machines this whole time. They're actually people, and it's like I was so like curious.
And they're like living in luxury too.
Yeah,
but that was a pretty interesting part about the whole thing too. Is that the breakers are like, they know what they're doing. It's like you'd think that people that were trying to end the universe would not find that many people to be on their side for it, but
yeah,
I don't know if like every single person in Algo Ciento knew what was going on, but a lot of them did.
Maybe it's like people are so willing to give up their freedom and even eventually their life for safety and security and like a
but like the
unknown
universe,
I know,
like if you like what, like how what does your life look like when you're like, And I'm sure that there are people that think that are in a place where they feel like, who cares? Like, let the whole universe die. Like, I'm not saying that that's invalid or doesn't happen or anything like that, but I thought that the sheer amount of people that they found that were down.
Yeah, there were also wizards.
Like, yeah, it's
they never explained like what they're doing too. Like, how are they breaking?
All right, so the thing with the breakers, I can just kind of like explain that whole thing real quick.
Oh,
if you
perfect.
Want. Okay, so they're
very
like
unsatisfied.
They're like telepaths, right?
Right, wizards,
and they've been like, so they've been brought together by agents of the Crimson King, and the leaders of Al Ghul Siento, like this kind of compound, are feeding them pills or like medication or something.
Yeah, kids' brains.
Yeah, it's the kids' brains and everything. So it's like they're so telepathic and their abilities are so enhanced that they're able to like telepathically break the beams, and it's just not really explained.
Okay. So but what does that look like? Is that like they're reaching down there and like breaking off
that's
chunks?
the thing that I've come to accept about Stephen King, that like you maybe haven't read enough Stephen King, or like he some shit just like happens. You know what I mean? Like in 11/22/63, this guy is able to travel back in time because he just stands in a specific spot in a diner. You know what I mean? And it's not explained at all. Like there's no like, oh, like what chemical compound are you using to like manipulate time and stuff.
Right, there's a little portal right here or something.
It's like literally he just finds it and it just puts him back in 1958, and we're moving on. And I think that with he has a tendency to do that kind of stuff where it's like the breakers break the beams because they're telepaths, and that's just the reality of what's going on. So we don't really need to get into like why they're doing that, or no, not why, how they're doing that specifically, because it really wouldn't. I mean, it's like if you're reading a science fiction book, do you really want to know like exactly how the spaceships like fly, or do you want to see them fly? You know what I mean? Like, do we need? It's like when you complain about Tom Clancy like endlessly describing the inside of a submarine. It's just like, dude, like what the hell? Like we don't need to know all this. And it would be kind of extra information that would be interesting, but not necessarily needed for an attack on Al Ghul Siento. But by that same logic, Stephen King, why do we have POV chapters from like these dudes inside of it? Like, I don't.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, like we're getting to know
like
them.
He's so good at like making sure that you don't have the information that's like unnecessary, but then he piles on like pages and pages and pages of stuff that doesn't matter either. So,
and sometimes I feel like it's just to gross us out. Like I literally almost threw up.
Pimple eating thing.
When offered like his like pimple juice.
Yeah,
to the other,
yeah, that was gross.
I can't even say it. Like it's just so disgusting.
I know. Like look at me, like saying like, oh, Stephen King likes to avoid things that are like not necessary, and it's like, what are you talking about? That so much of this wasn't necessary.
And the way he was like so like stoked on it. Oh my gosh, it was the most. Even thinking about it now, like it has the bile rising in my throat. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. It's like sometimes things just are, and but like even telepathy is weird, right? Because it's like I guess it implies that the beam is sentient. Adds to the whole tower thing, because telepathy is like mind-to-mind powers, right? So like Xavier. So
yeah, kind of. I guess that's just like what you're supposed to. I don't know. It's weird.
Yes, it's weird.
But maybe I don't know. Maybe there's a better explanation, but I haven't found it.
So like lobotomizing the tower.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. okay.
Sure.
That's it. One thing about Al Ghul Siento that I really liked was one, we did need a scene of action in that book. We couldn't have all of it not be, well, I guess the whole front 100 pages was wild, so never mind. It's hard for me to remember that the whole chase scene with Jake is in that book, because I think it should be the end of the last book.
Oh, you mean like the overlap from Song of Susanna into the Dark Tower? Yeah.
Like it seems like Song of Susanna should have ended with him at the door.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that in the episode previous, where like the first, like, I don't know, 200 pages of this book, or like maybe not that much, but a lot of it is like almost a recap. Not really a recap, but just what should have probably been in Song of Susanna.
The climax of the previous story, kind of.
Yeah, it's like he put the climax of Song of Susanna in the beginning of this book.
Yeah, I kept forgetting that I was at the beginning of a book. I was like, how? And like dinosaurs? Okay.
I like that part actually. The
too,
mind thing or whatever. Yeah, the mind trap. It gave some cool, like, more backstory to Jake when he was like watching that stuff, and it freaked him out. And like, yeah, that's cool. It's a nice effect. It's a good booby trap for like right before you go through a door into another place. And yeah, that was a nice touch. That was good.
Totally. However, I thought it was like a little weak that it was like they weren't actually there. It was like your brain will rip you up. Like, okay, like, I guess the power of belief, you know. You mentioned a few minutes ago about, you know, why we were kind of talking and laughing about like why the breakers are breaking when they're ruining everything. And there is one line that I thought was pretty clever that King does include, which is Ted being like, God help us, we've been working ever since, and God forgive us, most of us have been happy because the only thing talent wants is to be used. And I thought that was a pretty good line.
Yeah. Yeah,
know?
actually, now that you mention it, I think there was a line
destroying the universe, but
no, I mean, I think that now that you mention it, I think there was a line that was like they were like high off of it or something like that, which kind of is in line with what you're saying.
I don't know if it was the
sense.
breakers, but it was the Cantoy. They get above the breaker room where the breakers are doing the breaking, and like the breaking juice floats up and makes them all high.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Good feelings.
What the hell is going on? Like,
right? And it's kind of implied that might be Ted like throwing it up there to like distract them. I don't know. It gets weird. It gets real weird.
See,
now,
the thing with book 7 is that it's so much and it's so much faster than books 5 and 6 in my opinion. Like it's just one thing after another, except there is one part that I wanted to talk to you about,
okay,
which is the chapter Hides, where Roland and Susanna are just cold. Like they're just that's the chapter. They're cold. I know you like forgot about it for a second. It's a whole chapter. It's got a chapter name and everything, and I'm sure obviously it's significant. It's the last time that like Roland and Susanna are like bonded, you know what I mean, or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, their contact broke, but you know what I'm saying.
Totally.
It's like a nice, it's almost sad. Like a nice time. Yeah, it was just sad and like miserable.
Yeah.
And Susanna really misses Eddie. Jake's not there. It's super
good
cold.
Stuff is gone.
Like, yeah. I don't know. I didn't really like that chapter very much.
Me
just like, dude, you probably could have skipped over that. Like, you could have just said like, they killed a deer and got some hides,
right.
and
they're cold, and like Susanna learned how to make leather stuff.
Yeah, like 80 pages shorter, but it's fine.
Right, like we're learning how to make leather clothes now in the last part of the last book. Okay, whatever. Susanna, I don't know. I didn't like her leaving at all. Like I've
oh yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah,
I've corrected it in my own brain with my own theory of that he has to go through his journey 2 more times. With the final one, she doesn't leave, and he goes with her the whole way from the beginning to the end with Susanna. But like, I don't know. It's just like all of a sudden she's there. It's mentioned earlier, like if he dies, Susanna is so driven she will go on and carry the way to the tower without him. And like then all of a sudden she's just like, screw you. They kind of get into a little bit of a fight, and she's just like, death follows you everywhere, which is like, I get it. And it makes sense with my theory, but she's just like, throws in his face, and Jake died twice, and then she's just like, I'm out.
Yeah, I can see how you'd think that was out of character for her, and I suppose to a certain extent it is, but also Susanna hasn't been presented with an actual opportunity to leave, and the quartet is broken. So this is the first opportunity that she's had to actually escape out of here and like maybe go find Eddie. There's no more Kef being shared here, right? Like
right, and she realizes they did what they set out to do, I guess. Okay.
I don't know if she realizes that like consciously, but I think that part of Susanna knew, and I think I kind of touched on this at the beginning of the episode, but part of Susanna knew she wasn't needed anymore. There was nothing else she could do. She's gone as far as she needs to go. It's time for her to leave, and yeah, Roland begs her to stay because I think it's so wild that you came up with that theory because I've literally never seen it before. But it's really interesting to think that maybe Roland, some part of him knew he wasn't supposed to do this alone and he needed her, and Oy was going to die because Mordred was still out there, and it would have been Susanna and Roland. Maybe the only reason Roland keeps getting transported is because he keeps showing up to the tower alone. That's so, because like what would be in those rooms if it was both of them? Is it like the Mirror of Era said, where like whoever's looking into it sees something different? Oh, yeah, or like, what if they both look at it at the same time? Like, does rooms get really weird, or what? Does the tower transport them all to New York so they can all drink hot cocoa? Like, I don't know.
I don't know. And it's like the only reason he wants to get to the tower is kind of a self-serving, right? Like they did what they set out to do was save the tower. I didn't even realize this till you told me. Like after Al Ghul Siento, they're done. But it's like you're right. And because I was like mad at her, but I'm like, you're so close to doing what you set out to do. No, they're not. They already did it. Now he's just trying to like answer the question for his own sake. It's self-serving.
And there is a really special significance in that Susanna doesn't get killed. Jake, Eddie, Oi, and
Right.
Jake and Eddie and Oi all get killed, but Susanna leaves, right?
Mhm.
And so Roland getting upset that Susanna is leaving, dude, your theory is pretty sound.
Dude,
like
thank
that's
you.
very sound theory, yeah. Because like, what else would prove to the tower that Roland had learned his lesson? It would be bringing someone with him.
Right.
But also I have a little bit of a refutation there because like that was his plan. Like Roland's plan wasn't to go to the tower alone. Roland's plan was to go to the tower no matter what. But those are two different things.
True.
Right? He never told the Quartet he needed to go alone, which is interesting too. So yeah, there's a whole lot to that.
Yeah, maybe that was Susanna's mistake because it was self-serving of her to leave to go find.
Yeah.
Maybe she was the one who messed up his final.
What did you think about Susanna showing up in a different dimension with a different, like technically different Eddie and Jake and Oi?
Okay, I
It's like
I don't know.
bittersweet.
I'm hoping that I was going to be able to ask this before you got to it because I was going to take your answer and make it my own. Because half of me thinks it's kind of a cop out, like the end of Harry Potter, where it's like he's dead, he would sacrifice
Like,
himself for everything, but like
yeah.
not really. And he's like, I don't know, kind of removes the power of the actions and the sacrifice. Maybe it doesn't break the world, but it's kind of weird. It's like, so is she in that world somewhere, and she's not going to be happy like the other one of her because she won't ever find the people that she's supposed to be with, or like
Maybe it's a world where she was never born,
yeah.
because there would be some, obviously.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess there is some worlds that she's never born, huh? Yeah. Yeah, because Roland, there's not a bunch of Rolands. Maybe though, she was from the Key world. So there's only ever one of her. Like there's no other Rolands.
Oh, yeah,
you know?
interesting. Yeah. Huh. I
So
didn't think about that.
Yeah. I don't know though. I thought it was the ending that I wanted. But it was the ending, like this story didn't, it quickly became, once I started thinking about it, more than what I wanted. And it was like the point and the lessons that King was making, which I loved a lot more than the happy ending.
With Susanna in New York, like that, the epilogue, the chapter, I think I understand why Eddie and Jake didn't quite recognize Susanna, but something about Eddie knew that he loved her. That's very nice. That being said, I wish that Eddie and Jake would have just recognized her immediately. That would have been great. It really, like, if you're gonna do it, just do it, man. Just have them, just like have them all be there, and like Eddie and Jake beat death or whatever. And it wouldn't have made sense with like a lot of the way everything else makes sense in this book. But like as a fan and as somebody, yeah, seriously, that's a good way. Cod just like throw them a bone, and Cod did, if you think about it.
True.
But I don't know, like Eddie just being like, oh, I love you, but I don't know who you are. It's like, come on, man, just like have them be the same guys. Like let's party, you know, like hot cocoa. Like let's go.
You already did it. Do it.
Yeah, but it's fine. It's fine. But it's like it's not really Eddie and Jake, but it is Eddie and Jake. I don't know.
And she's like already forgetting. She's like, I'll tell you one day, honey. It's like, no, you'll tell me now why I've been going crazy. Like you wouldn't just let that sort of mystery sit. But then she's like, I'm already forgetting myself, so maybe I won't even know. And it's like, no, dude, have the Quartet live on. If you're gonna make it a happy ending, give it to
the Quartet does live on, but
it's like not them.
They don't have their din.
Yeah, and like where is Oi gonna come from?
It would have been so cool if Stephen King was just like, all right, whatever. Roland, when he goes up to the tower, he's transported to New York too, and they all hang out forever. Like that would have been.
He
maybe
opens
that's
the doors
ending
and
that
like
everyone
having
wanted.
Thanksgiving dinner like 2 years in the future.
Like I said, me not being happy with a perfectly resolved ending is the point of all of this. It's the point of it, you know? And I keep forgetting it because I'm so conditioned to want everything so lined up, and so buttoned up and so perfect. And it doesn't have to be like that. It can be the way that Stephen King wrote it. Man, what a brilliant man. God damn.
It's like a fairy tale, and it's the farthest thing from a fairy tale that there's ever been. It's all stories, and it's also none of those stories. It has a happy ending and one of the most tragic, sad, heart-wrenching endings of all time. Like everyone forces you to pick a lane when you write a story. Stephen did not do that. He made his own, and he blends all stories. It's kind of like Colors, right? It's like red and it's green. Yes, it's from other stories, but they blend together and now they're making yellow. And it's like a totally different thing that is fresh. And like I said, if there's anything that's close to truly original, I think this was it. Because he wrote everything and nothing. And
yeah, I mean, you can't create in a vacuum, obviously. You're going to take influence from other things, but
Totally.
This is wholly different from any other series that I've read. I'm going to ask one last question because I love ranking things. That's my thing, apparently.
Ooh.
And then we're going to take off soon, and we're not going to be doing the Dark Tower anymore. But we still have one more Dark Tower book.
Oh, that's true.
The Wind Through the Keyhole. So we're not going to say goodbye yet. Okay. We're still at security. We're not going to the gate and saying goodbye yet. Okay. So we're in the airport, but we still have some time.
My beating heart.
We still have some time. So let me just ask you real quick. How would you rank all 7 of these?
They all tell the story exactly how they should in the way that they should. Man, it's funny. I like this series a whole lot more after finishing it.
Yeah.
The ending really adds a lot.
Yeah. Like just go for it, like pure enjoyment, not like quality or like this, whatever. Just like as however much you enjoyed it.
Let me grab my box set. I think my least favorite, and it pains me to say this because, like I said, they all. It's
implied that you love them all. Yeah, it's cool. Yes, this is just fun for me.
My least favorite was the Gunslinger.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of people's least favorite for sure. It turns people off from reading any more at all. Yeah.
Which is, like I said, I think Stephen's built-in mechanism to like weed out the not worthy.
Oh my god!
He's like, if you can't get through 200 pages of awesome prelude, then whatever, you don't know. You're not ready for it. Not ready to end your looping of the tower journey. The next one is the Drawing of the Three.
Interesting. That was your second least favorite one?
Yeah, the story I didn't have the emotional connection to the characters.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It's like the very beginning of the quartet. There's no fruit for me to pull off that tree yet, so it's just kind of.
But I can see why you'd think it's better than the Gunslinger. It's like weirder and like more. There's more of things going on.
Yeah, there's a few gunfights. Like a naked gunfight, which is awesome. I thought that was really cool. The next one was Song of Susanna.
Okay. Yeah.
It was just if the first 200 pages of the Dark Tower was in Song of Susanna, that it would be maybe one higher.
Yeah, maybe I can see that for sure.
But it was just kind of a lot, and it was really sad too because it was like the quartet is separated, and I always hate when the problems with books are like interpersonal, like the group is mad at the group, which wasn't this. Yeah, but I like the group. It's together,
like inevitable, though.
Yeah, totally. Following that, okay, this is where it gets really difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna say the Dark Tower.
This is like the middle book.
Yeah, like, the middle. The final one is in this slot.
Interesting.
But it's also why I hold this whole thing in so much higher regard. Like I didn't truly love it and see it for what it is until the end, and so it's like
totally.
I love that aspect. So that's
cool.
A sacrifice. I'm sacrificing the last like 40 pages of that book. Then the Wastelands.
Oh yeah. For sure.
Because, man, that book.
That's where things get real.
Yeah, it gets real. And I really loved the city sequence when they get into the city. The whole thing was.
And then even when they leave the city, too, and like you see the wastelands.
Yeah, you go shooting out over them like all above and the technology. It was an exercise in imagination and insane weirdness that was so cool. And then ends with that, like, what's going to happen? We're about to go into a riddle off, which is always fun. After that, we have Wolves of the Kala.
Okay.
That's
your second favorite one?
That's my second favorite one. Okay. Yeah. I like stories that are simple. Yeah. Maybe not simple, but like we're pretty simple all over the place. Yeah, we're just like in one spot. Yeah, we're solving one problem. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Exactly. Yeah. We get to know some new people that are good guys. I really like that.
Yeah.
Also, there's the quartet really blooms. Jake kind of comes into himself.
They get really close.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, that's a lot of really good reasons for that. Yeah, totally.
Thank you. Also, can we just take a sidebar here to picture Jake with the Arisas? I loved him with
bag of sharp plates.
So good. Okay. Final favorite one being, and I haven't read Wind Through the Keyhole, so who knows? Ask me then. But The Wizard Wizard and Glass was my favorite.
That's a lot
The story
of people's
within a
favorite.
story.
That's a fantastic book.
Yeah,
That's
and again,
really,
it was
really
just about one thing, one story.
It's so funny how a lot of people's favorite book is Wizard and Glass, and it's like not even about the
His
quartet.
story. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Like
so
Cuthbert's one of my favorite characters of the whole story, but he was only in that book, you know?
cool.
Man,
Cool. That's a good order. I
you.
like it. Yeah.
thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
You're going to have to tell me yours.
Okay, cool. I'll do it really quickly.
Okay, well, I want to know the reasons too, though.
Okay, I can do the reasons.
Yeah, take your time.
Well, yeah, we're on a podcast. It's fine.
Yeah, it's not 2 in the morning.
If you're still with us, I mean, you did the whole series. Like, it makes sense. Like, thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. This
Super
could be
appreciate
the
it.
longest episode of Book Reviews Kill ever recorded.
My butt actually hurts.
Yeah.
I'm sitting.
All right, here we go. So I'm going to go from the book that I liked the least to the book that I liked the most.
Okay.
So for me, the bottom one is Wolves of the Kala. It was my least favorite the first time I read it.
Really?
It was my least favorite the second time I read it. Yeah, I don't
Why?
know. Like, it's just like it's way too many new characters this late in. You know what I mean? It felt like it was so much talking and plotting and then a pretty weak ending, you know?
Yeah,
it
it was
felt-
a lot of build up.
It felt way too long. You know, I didn't care about this village at all. I didn't care about Caliber and Sturgis. I didn't care about the kids. I didn't
Okay,
care
what's your
about any of it.
problem?
Yeah. So yeah, it's number 5. Still awesome, obviously. Then after that is The Gunslinger.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, like, I think it's weird and cool, and it's got like I don't know why, but I can't separate The Gunslinger from Afro Samurai. Like, I have those like those two aesthetics like kind of locked in place for myself.
Yeah. This.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, for sure. It's like this
Yeah.
despairing post-apocalyptic.
yeah, and it's like this guy
Loneliness.
wandering through it and stuff. And there's like the cowboy kind of like element to Afro Samurai, which is really like the
Totally.
saloon type
Which I
element.
love Afro
like
Samurai, by the way.
Oh my god, it's incredible. I fucking
good.
love Afro Samurai so much. But like when Afro goes into that saloon and like orders lemonade, you know, it's like it's very similar to
So
Roland kind of going in. And like the first time that I read The Gunslinger, I was like 20 or something. Because I've read The Gunslinger 3 times now.
Oh wow.
I read The Gunslinger as like a standalone when I was like 20 or 21 or something.
Oh, that's
um,
terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I still thought it was cool, but I had watched Afro Samurai like for the first time like right before I read it, so it's kind of always locked in place for me. But yeah, The Gunslinger it's awesome. It's just not. It's so I don't know how to put it. I can see why it puts people off
It's
because
lonely.
and you don't know what the hell is going on or why anything's
Totally.
happening or
It's
any,
dreamy.
yeah, it's a fever dream.
It's a fever dream. Totally.
So then after The Gunslinger, 5th place is Song of Susanna. I like Song of Susanna. I didn't like it as much this go around as I did on my first time, which is really interesting. Yeah, for a lot of the same reasons that you had. You know, it felt like the ending could have been stronger. The Susanna Mia chapters were kind of confusing. Like I didn't really know, like when they were in Fedig together the first time, when like Mia gave Susanna like some weird vision of Fedig or what. It's just a lot of like really kind of
Yeah.
ethereal parts to it that I was like, what the hell is going on? And then like when
Like I'm not sure if I'm in someone's brain or in the real
Yeah,
world,
and
whatever
then,
that
like,
means.
and then Roland and Eddie meet up with Calvin Tower and Aaron Deep now, and that was like seriously one of the most boring parts of the entire series is when they're like talking about them like starting a company and like Microsoft and like all this dumb shit, and it's very important obviously, but I was just like, good, can we roll this
Right.
along? Like,
We're in a fantasy novel. We're checking our Instagram.
yeah. All right, so then in 4th place is Drawing of the Three. I love Drawing of the Three. Eddie and Roland first meeting is amazing. Like Eddie getting Roland like the Pepsi and Roland drinks it, and he's like, oh my god, it's so sweet. Oh, and he's like a hot dog and he calling sandwiches
aspirin.
popkins and stuff, and he's on like the plane sequence was so exciting when Eddie's got all that cocaine strapped to him and Eddie's all fucked up and he's like he's addicted to drugs and stuff, and he comes through and his reaction to Roland is really cool, and then Susanna coming through, that whole sequence was so awesome. Like getting introduced to Susanna was great, and there's no Jake at all in that book, which is why it's a little bit lower on the list. It's like there should be Jake, and so I really like Drawing of the Three a lot. I think it's great.
Now you're saying all those things. I loved every one of those things. You know,
All right, so then in third place, I have the Dark Tower, book 7.
Nice.
It's so good. It's just so epic for all the reasons that we just talked about on this episode.
It's the keystone.
Yeah, and it kind of got bumped up on my second read through because I got to think about it a lot more. I got to talk with you about it a lot more, and yeah, it's a very, very good ending to the series, especially after 2 books that are okay, but they're like not my favorites, you know.
Yeah.
And then I think it rounds out like in a really good way.
And if a book's going to be this weird, it better have like something. There better be some meaning to the weirdness besides it's just weird, and that's what the Dark Tower did.
And then in second place is Wizard and Glass. It's funny because Wizard and Glass was my least favorite. Oh no, it's right above Wolves of the Kala. Because I think Wolves of the Kala was my least favorite the first time too.
Wow.
But Wizard and Glass was way down the list my first time through this. Yeah, Wizard and Glass. The second time through, I appreciated so much more of Roland's story with Susan Delgado. I think it's because I knew that it was going to end at some point, and I felt so much more connected to Roland's backstory after reading Wizard and Glass and knowing how the whole story ends and what he's headed towards and what he's left behind and everything. It's just amazing on the second read through. And then, yeah, book 1, the first book on my list, top of the list, is The Wastelands. It's incredible. It's one of the best books Stephen King's ever written. It's, in my opinion, it's King in top form. It's everything I want out of a Stephen King book. The quartet is formed. We get Jake, we find Oy. There's the whole part with Jake coming through the door with the house monster and everything, the giant cyborg bear.
Peak weird, peak awesome.
And then Blaine, the city of Lud. River crossing was great. I really like the river crossing scene. I think River Crossing was done better than Colibri Sturgis personally, and I know I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for that, but I don't care. Yeah,
I agree.
The Wastelands is the best Dark Tower book in my opinion, but they're all the best Dark Tower book. I know that it sounds cheesy, but I love every single one of these books, even Wolves of the Kala, which I kind of shit on all the time. But
it's funny because it was like my third one or something.
I know, it's like you really loved it.
Well, yeah. And as when you were saying your list, I wanted to like change mine so many times, and I feel bad now having Wizard and Glass be my second favorite because it's like not even really the story. It's like I feel bad for my friends, Jake.
Oh, you mean having it be
Eddie.
Your favorite?
Yeah. It's like I feel guilty that it's my favorite one because it's not even really the story.
No, but that's how much you enjoyed it. It doesn't matter. It's like, yeah. But wow, I think we got to wrap this up, Chad.
As we've said many times, there is always like another loop of the story. This story literally, and eventually we have to end some way. We can keep digging and digging, and we will probably never get to China on this one, but man, it has been a pleasure reading through it with you, Evan.
I absolutely loved it. It was if anything could have augmented my read through of this book, it's sitting here with you talking about all of these, and especially you listening. Thank you for being here while we go through this, and I hope that you had just as much fun and were weirded out just as much as we were, and I hope you cried. And man, it's send
us some emails if you have some sweet theories, please.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get Stephen King on the podcast.
Yeah,
he says no to everybody. Apparently,
he hasn't responded to my email.
He's a pretty famous person. So he was on The Simpsons for fuck's sake. So
too bad.
But yeah, everybody, I can't thank you enough for being here with us and sharing Kef with us and going on this turn of the wheel of Ka with us. This is a very bittersweet moment because I'm excited to move on to some other stuff. There's a lot of books we need to tackle this year. And I think we're going to read some really good stuff, but I knew this was going to hurt. I knew it was going to hurt. I put off reading the last 100 pages of The Dark Tower for like 5 days when I could have just pounded it out in like an hour and a half, but I really didn't want to say goodbye to these characters. And the hangover from this series is going to be pretty intense because we've been reading The Dark Tower for the last like month and a half, almost 2 months. And yeah, I knew it was going to be rough. This is the roughest one, actually, of all the ones that we've read this year.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't have said that like a couple days ago. I was like kind of ready to be done with the towel. I was like, I'm ready to move on. But now that I see it for what it is,
you got hit. You got hit hard.
Love it. I got hit hard, man. I got hit hard. But if there's anything that will be my medicine moving forward is the companion is my own quartet. You and all of our listeners.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We still have one more Dark Tower episode to do, which is the Wind Through the Keyhole, so stay tuned for that. We'll be moving on to more series this year, quite a few more series, so thank you so much for listening. Okay.
Dude, I know we have to do this again after the Wind Through the Keyhole. Like, oh my God.
That's going to be really bad.
Hard.
Okay, let's just do it. Let's just do it right this time. Okay, we're just going to say goodbye. Long days and pleasant nights, Chad.
May you have twice the number.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and of course, happy reading.
Bye, everybody.